The single most powerful woman in 3,000 realms had me pinned flat on her bed, and my entire survival plan was evaporating in real time. Her name was Zi Mingyu, Empress of the Supreme Divine Dynasty, my master, and this is the part that matters, roughly 1,000 times stronger than me. She could punch through a mountain range and fix her hair on the way out, and right now she was looking down at me the way I used to look at a hot pizza after a 14-hour shift. "Good disciple," she said, in a voice like warm honey with a blade hidden in it. "You've come of age today. Do you know what that means?" I had a horrible feeling I was about to find out. "Master," I said, with all the dignity of a grown man being sat on by a goddess, "I really feel like we could talk about this, verbally, from a distance." She leaned closer. My cultivation, for the record, was so far below hers, it wasn't even a fair fight. It wasn't a fight at all. It was a cat deciding whether the mouse was worth the effort. And that was the exact second the universe chose to switch itself on. A chime went off inside my skull, bright, cheerful, absolutely reading the room wrong. "Congratulations to the host on completing the coming-of-age ceremony. The Destiny villain system is now binding to you." I froze. Not because of the woman, because a menu had just opened behind my eyes like the world's worst timed software update. "System," I said, internally, very calmly, the way you'd talk to a bomb. "Send help. Send anything. Send a newbie gift pack. Send an exit. Send a fire alarm." The system answered in a chirpy little voice, and then, mid-sentence, dropped into cold robot mode like it had two personalities and hated one of them. "Relax, host. Your master's mind is perfectly clear. She's simply very fond of you. Enjoy yourself. Do not disturb mode is now activating. Do the opposite of that. Disturb everything." The menu winked out. The line went dead. My all-powerful new cheat had taken one look at my situation and gone on break. Cool. Very cool. Love that for me. Here is what you need to understand about my master. She was not cruel. That was almost the worst part. She was devoted. She had wanted this exact moment since I was 3 years old and clinging to her neck, refusing to let go, and she had waited patiently, terrifyingly, for 2 decades, and she was absolutely not going to let a little thing like the power gap between us slow her down. I would love to tell you I handled it with grace. What actually happened is that the gap between a peak void refining cultivator and a woman who could unmake reality caught up with me all at once. My vision went white, and I passed out like a man whose body had filed for early retirement. The last thing I heard was her laughing, soft and pleased, and tucking a blanket over me. "Sleep, little wolf," she murmured. "You'll grow up eventually." So, that's me. 20 years old, unconscious, drooling on the most expensive pillow in existence, freshly bound to a mysterious system that had already ghosted me once. Let me tell you how I got here, because it genuinely explains everything. In my last life, I was a normal guy on a normal, miserable planet called Earth. I worked. That was the whole personality. I worked overtime, I worked weekends, I worked myself into a hospital-shaped grave, and I died face down at my desk at 3 in the morning finishing a report nobody would ever read. Cause of death, medically speaking, being a productivity resource. The universe looked at my life, checked its notes, and said, "LOL, no second chances, buddy." And then it gave me a second chance anyway, because the universe is a hypocrite. I opened my eyes, and I was a baby. A very rich baby. The kind of baby that gets a marble palace and 40 servants and an aura of terrifying destiny. I had been reborn as the eldest son of the immortal ancient Gu family, the single scariest clan in the 3,000 Dao domains. My family didn't have money. My family had emperors. 3 of them, actually, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Here's the thing that made me special, and I want to explain it right because it's the engine of this entire story. I was born with something called the Myriad Transformations body. On paper, it sounds like garbage. No flashy powers, no destroying mountains at birth, none of the cool stuff the other prodigies got. What it actually does is quieter and 100 times worse for everyone who isn't me. It's infinitely compatible. Whatever you feed it, it eats. Divine bones, monster bloodlines, sacred hearts, the eyeballs of dead god kings. My body just absorbs all of it, melts it down into pure fuel, and gets stronger. No rejection, no limit. So my loving family fed me, constantly. On my full moon, my father transplanted a divine Dao bone into me. Its previous owner got left to rot in a wasteland and was never heard from again. You learn not to ask questions in my family. When I turned 1, my second uncle came back from conquering a forbidden zone, casually handed me a demonic bone he'd forged by refining an entire small world down into a single rib, and called it a birthday present. At 3, my mother killed a quasi-emperor who happened to have a pair of legendary ancient double pupils, scooped them out, and put them into me like she was slotting batteries into a toy. By the time I could walk, I was less a child and more a treasure vault that could cry. And somewhere in there, staring up at the ceiling with a mouthful of divine pacifier, 3-year-old me had a thought that has never once left me since. Oh no, I'm the villain. Because that's the setup. That is textbook. Rich, overpowered heir, monstrous family, growth through plunder, everything handed to me by killing somebody else. I had read enough web novels in my last life to know exactly what kind of character I was. I wasn't the plucky underdog. I was the arrogant young master the plucky underdog throws a punch at in Chapter 3 to establish the stakes. And in a world with a heaven that literally handpicks heroes to tear down families like mine, that's not a personality. That's a death flag with legs. So when I finally woke up in my master's bed, alone, aching in places I refused to itemize, with a brand new system rattling around my head, I did not panic. I had known this day was coming for 17 years. I sat up, I cracked my neck, and I opened the menu. System, I said. Panel, now. And no more do not disturb nonsense. We're past that. Ding. Opening system panel. Host, Zhang Fei. Age, 20. Cultivation, peak of the void, refining realm. Constitution, myriad transformations, sacred body, beginner tier, villain value, 10,000. 10,000, I said. Out of the gate. What did I do to earn that? Existing since childhood, apparently. The system informed me, with something almost like pride, that villain value was a reward for villainous achievements, and that I had been accumulating it my whole life without trying. My top lifetime entry was flagged as heart-burning arson, level 4. I did not remember committing arson. I decided not to look into it. Then it showed me my halos, and this is where I started to smile. 3 of them. Supreme Charm Aura, Gold rank. Anyone who meets me likes me 30% more on sight, double that if she's a woman. Extraterrestrial Visitor Aura, Rainbow rank. Because I'm not from this world, the local heaven can't read me, can't predict me, can't touch my fate. And the big one, Supervillain Aura, Orange rank. As the world's designated villain, I am magnetically, cosmically drawn to the heroes I'm supposed to fight. Meeting a son of destiny, my odds just doubled. Let me translate that last one, because it took me a second too. The heaven of this world picks champions. Sons of destiny, underdog kids with cheat codes and plot armor, and every single one of them eventually grows up, gathers an army of fellow underdogs, and goes to war against exactly one target, the arrogant, overpowered, doomed by the narrative old families. Families like mine. My system's whole purpose was to point me at those kids, and my whole purpose, the second I understood the assignment, became very simple. Find them first, while they're still small, while they're still losing. All right, I said, rubbing my hands together. What's in the welcome basket? The gift pack cracked open, and my jaw nearly followed it to the floor. A cultivation technique, primordial grade Wu DJ, the godly spirit, myriad transformation, heavenly scripture, custom built for my body, which meant I could now devour and transform anything on a professional level instead of an amateur one. When I asked the system what primordial grade meant, it told me, and I quote, that compared to primordial quality, the finest treasures my god-tier family owned weren't fit to be used as toilet paper. I decided the system and I were going to get along. Then 2 treasures. The Great Luodao Pagoda, a golden 9-story tower with time and space swirling inside it, locked, that I could only crack open by burning the fate of the heroes I killed. Current progress, 0 out of 2,000, and the Mystic Azure Treasure Mirror, which I opened, flipped through eagerly, and found completely, insultingly blank. It's empty, I said. Turn to page 3, host. I turned to page 3, and nearly had a nosebleed on the spot. Page 3 was my master, rendered in loving, extremely flattering, deeply illegal detail. System, I said slowly. Is this thing legitimate? Legally. Is this a legal treasure? The mirror pinged. Congratulations. Page 3 complete. Reward. 1 colored treasure chest. I opened the chest out of pure spite, expecting a coupon. I got the Human Emperor banner, a mysterious flag wrapped in purple and gold, stitched with 9 5-clawed dragons, drifting in the air with no wind and a faint sound of dragon roar coming off it like a low-engine hum. Down the pole, in old Tao script, bestowed by heaven, may your reign be long. It radiated the kind of imperial pressure that makes lesser men fall to their knees and lose control of their bladders. Buddy, I told the system, your purple aura is a little strong. The leader of the righteous path deserves a fitting treasure, it replied, without a shred of self-awareness. I looked at the flag. I looked at page 3 of the perverted mirror. I looked at the general shape of my new life. A system that worshipped me, a body that ate gods, a family that armed me like a walking apocalypse, and a job description that boiled down to hunt down heroic teenagers before they hunt down my parents. Okay, I said out loud, to no one. Okay, is this how we're playing it? Somewhere in the back of my skull, the system was practically vibrating with joy. I really wish I could tell you I hated it. The message that dragged me out of my master's palace came from my father, and it was 4 words long. Fire. Come home. Now. My father does not waste words. My father is a man who once fought 3 demon emperors at the same time, killed one, crippled the other 2, and strolled away with his green robe so spotless you'd think he'd spent the afternoon in a garden. The world calls him the Evergreen Emperor. I call him Dad, and even I get a little nervous when he starts using periods. Getting out of the palace, though, that was the hard part. You're leaving, my master said, materializing in the doorway in a way that broke several laws of nature, for an entire year. Family business, I said, drifting toward the exit like a man who did not want to be noticed drifting. Very dull. Spirit logistics. You'd hate it. An entire year, she repeated, as if I hadn't spoken. And you'd leave your poor master all alone in this cold, empty palace. The palace was neither cold nor empty. It was the beating heart of the largest dynasty in the lower half of the heavens. But you do not win an argument with a woman who could rewrite the sky, so I did what any man of courage and principle would do. I negotiated, badly, and lost. By the time I finally staggered out the next morning, the sun was up, my lower back had filed a formal complaint, and I had learned a valuable lesson about the phrase "just one more night." Feeding a female demon is, I want to be clear, physically demanding work. Waiting for me on the flying boat was a woman in black with a veil over her face and a figure that could stop traffic in 2 realms. Her name was Meyer, my master's personal shadow guard, the kind of assassin you assign to someone you love and don't trust the world with. She said maybe 6 words the entire trip, all of them some variation of, "Yes, Your Highness," and spent the rest of the time being silent, deadly, and unreadable. So, I tried, somewhere over the 3rd mountain range. What do you think Master's reasoning was, making you stand there, during, you know? Meyer's veil turned very slightly pink. Meyer does not know. Yeah, I sighed. I figured you wouldn't. Elite bodyguards, incredible work ethic, 0 conversation. I gave up and watched the clouds. Then the boat came down, and I was home, and home came at me like a cannonball. Yunner, my fire, you're finally back! My mother hit me at roughly the speed of sound and wrapped me in a hug so complete I briefly lost track of which way was up. Young Roland. Radiant, terrifying, quasi-emperor tier, and completely incapable of treating me like anything other than a slightly damp toddler. Mom, I wheezed from inside the softness. I'm old enough to have my own disciples, Jay. Half a month, she said, holding me at arm's length to inspect me for damage. That wicked woman only lets you come home 9 times a year. 9. She stole my baby and rations him back to me like I'm begging for scraps. That wicked woman was, of course, my master. My mother and my master were sworn sisters, best friends, and had been locked in a cold war over custody of me since I was 3 years old. I had long ago accepted that I was less a person to these two and more a trophy in an ongoing dispute. Ruolin, he's 20. Let the boy breathe. A stern voice, calm as deep water. My father, walking out of the compound with a face that hadn't cracked a smile in 3,000 years. And behind him, of course, came the noise. Ha! Look at him! Little Feezy's all grown up. My second uncle arrived the way weather arrives, shattering the air in front of him, purple aura rolling off his shoulders. Zhang Honglei, emperor, war maniac, and the single most dangerous man I have ever loved. His nickname across the realms used to be the Demon Emperor. These days people call him the Butcher, which he considers a promotion. Second uncle, I said, bowing. Bowing, look at this, so formal. He threw an arm around my neck. Back when I was hauling you around the forbidden zones, you didn't have a single manner in your body. What happened? You go soft? He leaned in, delighted. Hey, little Feezy, that demonic bone I gave you, still working out? Because I found a few more ownerless little worlds last week, and I was thinking, second uncle, please. Dad's right there. And if you keep racking up kills like that, you'll never survive your immortal tribulation. Bah, tribulations are for people who miss. He ruffled my hair with a hand that had ended civilizations. You little rascal, always got an answer. This is my family. I want you to hold on to this, because everything I did after this, every terrible, unforgivable, gleefully villainous thing, I did for these 3. There's my father, the Evergreen Emperor, one man who can hold off 10,000 and never raise his voice. There's my second uncle, the Butcher, who fights heaven and earth for fun and has never once lost. And there's my third uncle, Zhang Fenghua, alchemy madman, who came sprinting out of his lab 30 seconds too late, pale as a ghost, waving a pill he'd stayed up all night refining. Wait, where's Xiaofeizi? I made him a divine essence pill. Where did he? 3 emperors, 1 family. That combination had never happened in recorded history, and it was the entire reason the Gu clan sat on top of the 3,000 Dao domains like a mountain on an anthill. It was also the reason the heaven of this world wanted us dead. You don't get to be that untouchable without the universe deciding to grow itself a hero or two. Which, it turned out, was exactly what my father had called me home to talk about. Fire. He led me inside, and the warmth in the room cooled by 10 degrees. It's time for your fusion spirit. Here's the short version, because my father gave me the long one, and it involved 3 diagrams. To break into the next tier of cultivation, the body fusion realm, a cultivator has to merge with a fusion spirit. Most people pick a nice compatible treasure and call it a day, not me. My myriad body needed the best of the best, the living, thinking spirit of a small world. Refine one of those into yourself, and you don't just break through. You gain a whole pocket dimension you can teleport across, offense and defense in one package, the foundation stone for one day becoming an emperor myself. There's a world, my father said, in the lower realm, the azure profound realm. Its spirit is ripening a supreme treasure, the heart of the source. In roughly 1 year, it will be perfect. He fixed me with a look. The clan has tried to take world spirits before. We have always failed. The worlds fight back. They grow their own defenders. So why me? Because you're different. He said it simply, the way you'd state a fact about the weather. If you can go down there alone and take a piece of a world spirit by force, DJ, the whole clan will fall in line behind you. No one will ever question who leads the Gu family after me. My mother beamed. My father looked at me with 3,000 years of quiet, crushing hope. It was genuinely touching. It would have been more touching if my second uncle hadn't chosen that exact moment to tear open a hole in space behind me and shove me through it with the flat of his palm. Hey Vijay, off you go, Xiaofizi. Bring back a good one. We did not discuss the launch method, Vijay. The last thing I saw was my third uncle skidding into the room, still holding that pill, wailing, "Is he gone?" I made him Avjay, as the rift swallowed me whole. I'll say this for my family. They love me, loudly, chaotically, and with absolutely no regard for my personal safety, and I was about to burn down an entire world to keep them. I landed in the azure profound realm the way my second uncle mails all his packages, face first, at speed, without a note. Except I didn't hit dirt. I hit something soft, which let out a very undignified oof. And when I got my bearings, I discovered I was lying full length on top of a woman in black with her veil knocked crooked and her face gone the exact color of a sunset over a slaughterhouse. "Meyer," I said, "what are you doing here?" "His Majesty ordered me to protect you personally, Your Highness." Her voice, which for the entire flying boat ride had been a flat professional monotone, had somehow risen 2 octaves and caught fire. She was also, I want to be delicate about this, extremely aware that during the landing my hand had come to rest in a location that generally requires an appointment. I removed the hand at a speed that would have impressed my second uncle. We agreed, without a single word passing between us, to never mention it again as long as we both should live. Meyer, it turned out, had been assigned to guard me from the shadows the whole way down. To make it easier, she could dissolve her whole body into a small black pattern and ride along on my robe, which she demonstrated, folding down into an elegant little curl of ink at my collar, and which was genuinely, tactically useful, right up until I poked the pattern out of scientific curiosity, and she made a noise and informed me, strangled, that it tickled. "Right," I said. "Noted. Filing that next to the other thing we're never discussing." I stood up, dusted myself off, and had my first proper look at the world I'd come to rob. The azure profound realm. 8 states, 1 broad lower realm continent, spiritual energy thin and sour compared to home but livable. My clan had sent me down with a map, and on that map 3 locations glowed, circled in careful spiritual ink: the Endless Volcano, the Sea Marsh Kingdom, the Azure Spirit Eye, the 3 great prizes of this whole little world. I looked at all 3, and I went to none of them. Here is the single most important thing I understand about a world with a designated hero, and it's the thing that made this entire trip easy instead of impossible. Every good opportunity in a world like this is bait. Every legendary treasure, every convenient lucky break, every perfectly timed inheritance sitting in a cave with a note that says, "For the worthy, it's all reserved." The heaven of this world lays it out like a picnic on a blanket and waits, patiently, for its chosen champion to come strolling through and pick it up. If I marched up to those 3 glowing circles ahead of schedule, I'd be a man trying to carry water in a wicker basket. I'd get nothing, and I'd get it slowly, and I'd probably trigger 3 separate guardian bosses on the way out. So I did the smart thing. I didn't chase the treasure. I went looking for the kid the treasure was being saved for. System. There's a son of destiny somewhere in this world. Find him. The menu lit up instantly, delighted to finally be useful. It offered me 2 options: pay a chunk of villain value to lock onto the target, or pay double to lock him and unlock his full file. "Take the double," I said before it finished the sentence. "I've got 10,000 points and a family to keep alive. This is not the moment to shop the clearance rack." Ding. Congratulations, host. Target locked. Yang Wei, Son of Destiny. Bonus reward. 2 Destiny scripts unlocked. Divine Fire Emperor and the life and death of a beloved wife. And that, right there, is the single most broken thing my system ever handed me. Not the God flag, not the tower. This. A Destiny script is a book. A literal, complete 8 million word novel telling the entire life story of a son of destiny, cover to cover, underdog to God King. Every enemy he will ever beat, every treasure he will ever find, every woman who will ever fall into his arms. Every clever, moving, beautifully engineered twist the universe has lovingly prepared to carry this one specific kid all the way to the top of the world. I sat down in the mouth of a cave, conjured the 2 books into my hands, lit a small fire, and read all night. Mayor squatted nearby, silent, watchful, pretending with tremendous discipline that she wasn't staring at the side of my face. By the time the fire burned down to coals, I knew Yang Wei's whole life. And because the second book had come free with the first, I knew the other one too. Yi Ming, the star of the life and death of a beloved wife, currently 18 years old and weak as wet paper. A threat so minor I'd deal with him at a tournament in a few weeks almost as an afterthought. I knew where they'd both go, who they'd meet, what they'd become, every page, and I knew the one detail that put a cold hand on the back of my neck and left it there. In both books, different heroes, different arcs, different loves, different tragedies, the ending is the same. They grow up. They gather their armies of fellow underdogs. They climb out of this little world into the upper realm, and they go to war against the immortal ancient Gu family. My mother, who rations me back to herself 9 times a year and cries about it. My father, who has never smiled at me and means it every time he doesn't. My uncle, who wanted to take me to a war just to spend time with me. Ash. Both books. Every version. I closed the covers. The coals popped. Somewhere under my usual expression, in the place I keep the things I don't say out loud, something went very still and very cold. Well, I said quietly. That settles that. Both of them have to die. I'm aware of how that sounds. 2 teenagers, one of them, at this exact moment, a starving nobody who's never done a single thing to me, and I just sat in a cave and calmly sentenced them both to death before either had thrown a punch. If you're building a list of reasons I'm the villain, go ahead and write that one at the top. But let me put it to you the exact way I put it to myself, in that cave, at dawn, with 2 books full of my mother's death cooling in my hands. The future in these pages already happened. Somewhere, to somebody. It's one possible tomorrow out of 14 million, sure. And in exactly one of those 14 million tomorrows, these 2 kids grow all the way up and turn everyone I love into a story other people tell. I don't care if it's a 1 in 14 million shot. You do not leave the safety off just because the odds are good. And here is the genuinely, deliciously villainous beauty of the whole thing, the part that made me start, despite everything, to smile again. I didn't have to hunt these boys across a continent. I didn't have to guess. I had their schedules. I had every golden opportunity fate had set aside for them, in order, with times and locations. I just had to get there first, and take it. Every treasure they were promised, I'd be standing on when they arrived. Every woman written into their destiny, I'd meet first. Every lucky break the universe had wrapped up with their name on the tag, I'd open it in front of them and thank them for the gift. Meyer, I said, standing, brushing off my robe, feeling almost cheerful about it, in the awful way you feel cheerful about a job you're very good at. Change of plans. We're not hunting a hero. No, Your Highness? No. I looked out at the pale lower realm dawn, at a whole world laid out like a book I'd already read the ending of. We're going to go stand in his story, and wait for him to walk in. The story I chose to walk into was Yang Wei's very first big scene, and it was a good one, a classic, the kind of moment that turns a nobody into a legend. Purple cloud mountains, mist in the valleys, thunder in the peaks. Down below, exactly on schedule, a woman was losing a fight to a monster, and a hidden young man was watching her with his entire heart hanging out of his chest. The woman was Han Qingyu, and the mirror flipped open a page for me the second I laid eyes on her. 75 years old, peak void refining, wrapped in emerald green, a spirit sword throwing cold blue light, a pair of ghostly cyan wings shimmering at her back. Beautiful in the specific untouchable way that starts cults. In Yang Wei's book, she was the first great love of his life, the proud sect leader he saves today, heals tonight, and wins forever. Her opponent was a very large, very annoyed tiger with wings and a lightning problem, the crazy thunder tiger, king of these mountains, late-tier void refining, and not, let us say, a generous negotiator. Tiger King, she was saying, sword up, blood already at the corner of her mouth. I have no wish to be your enemy. Lend me the purple thunder bamboo and I'll be gone by nightfall. My master is dying. I don't have time for this. Humph. The tiger's fur crackled purple. The purple thunder bamboo is the work of my whole cultivation, woman. You want it for a few pretty words? His huge head tilted, considering her the way a merchant considers a coin. No. I think I'll keep the bamboo, and I think I'll keep you too. A prize like you would look very fine chained beside my throne, a trophy for every beast in these mountains to envy. The bamboo stays. You stay. Everybody wins. Well, I win twice. Charming. A real statesman. You talk too much, Han Qingyu said, and lunged. And off in the tree line, hidden, sweating, gripping a branch hard enough to bleed sap, was our hero, Yang Wei. Blood-refining cultivation, a borrowed engine of power humming under his skin, courtesy of the ghost of an old fire cultivator riding along in his head, a master who fed him strength and whispered encouragement. He was watching Han Qingyu the way you watch something you've already decided is yours. That beast, he breathed, knuckles white. How dare he speak to my woman like that? His woman. I want to stress that they had not met. She did not know he was alive. He had seen a pretty girl in trouble exactly once and immediately started drafting the wedding invitations. But that's a son of destiny for you. The universe tells them from birth that everything they want is theirs by right, and nobody's ever around to correct the record. The mirror gave me his file too, and it was educational. Yang Wei, 23, heavenly flame divine body, a top 100 physique, genuinely rare, genuinely dangerous once it woke up, a dead father to avenge, a stolen sister to find, and a certainty, bone deep and unearned, that the whole world was a stage the universe had built for him to stand on. Teacher, he whispered to the ghost in his head, when she's hurt, when she falls, I'm going to save her. She'll be mine. Easy, little Lin, the old ghost murmured back. That woman's stronger than she looks. Wait for your moment. His moment. Right. I drifted down through the mist, quiet, unhurried, with mire folded invisible on my collar, and I got comfortable in the air about 100 feet up to watch the fight develop because I'm a professional, and professionals do their reconnaissance. Down below, the battle went the way the book promised. Han Qingyu was good, genuinely good, fierce and precise, and for a while she pushed the tiger hard, opened a long wound down his chest, made him bleed for every inch. But he was a demon king, and demon kings hit like landslides, and the moment she overcommitted, his innate technique caught her, a wave of paralyzing purple lightning that locked every muscle in her body at once. Now surrender, the tiger rumbled, tail rising for the finish, and I'll be gentle about the chains. Her sword came up anyway, arm shaking, jaw locked, sheer will dragging her body past what the lightning allowed, and she poured everything she had left into one last strike. A rising blade of wind aimed to cut the beast in half. It nearly worked. It opened him to the bone. But at the last instant he twisted, took the wound instead of the death, and his tail came down like a falling tower across her ribs. She spat blood. She dropped out of the sky, out cold before she finished falling, tumbling straight down toward the tree line, toward the exact spot where a young hero was already gathering himself to leap, heart pounding, the first line of his legend right there on his lips. Meyer, I said, the kid. When I move, put him in the dirt. Don't kill him. I need him whole. Yes, Your Highness. I felt her smile against my throat. Then I moved. I stepped off of nothing, crossed 100 feet of open air in the space between one heartbeat and the next. No wings, no flying sword, just walking on the sky the way only body fusion masters are supposed to be able to, and I'd been past that mark for a while. And I caught Han Qingyu out of the air a full second before she reached the hands that were reaching for her. She landed in my arms light as a folded coat, one wing dragging, blood on her lips, breathing shallow. Behind me, off in the trees, there was a wet, heavy thump, the sound of Meyer driving a son of destiny face first into the mountainside hard enough to change the local geography. The tiger stared at me, this stranger, standing on empty air, holding his prize, radiating an aura he couldn't read and didn't like. Human! His voice shook a little, under the bluster. Who are you? Do you have any idea whose mountain you're standing on? You, I said, mildly, adjusting the unconscious woman in my arms so her head wasn't at a bad angle. Are extremely loud, and I've had a long day. I want to be honest with you about the fight that followed, because it set the pattern for the whole trip, and I don't want you spending the next several hours thinking any of this was close. It wasn't a fight. It was a chore. The tiger roared for backup, and two rival demon kings came crashing in to yell at him about who'd wrecked whose territory, which just meant 3 furious mountain kings instead of 1, 3 peak-tier terrors that this whole world trembled at. To me, they were 3 loud insects sharing one bad idea. I shifted Han Qingyu to one arm. I raised the other hand. A vast palm of pure divine force condensed in the air over the valley, blotting out the light, and the 3 demon kings had just enough time to understand all at once that the picnic had never been for them. I brought it down. When the dust cleared, there was a fresh crater where a piece of the mountains used to be. 3 demon cores sitting clean in the rubble like eggs in a nest, and the human emperor banner unrolling overhead all on its own, drinking in the drifting souls of everything I just flattened with the quiet contentment of a man enjoying a cold drink on a hot day. The hero was already gone. Some last reflex from his Ghostmaster had yanked him clear at the final instant, a streak of light fleeing over the ridge, which was fine. Better than fine. I didn't want him dead yet. I wanted him alive and confused and pointed in exactly the wrong direction. His girl, though. His girl was coming with me. I looked down at the unconscious sect leader in my arms, at the deep wound the tiger had carved from her shoulder down, sparking faintly with dying lightning, and I sighed like a man looking at a long afternoon of paperwork. "Come on then," I told her, though she couldn't hear me. "Let's get you fixed up. You've got a very important part to play in all this." I stepped back up onto the empty air. "It just isn't the one they promised you." I healed her in a quiet cave, and I did it properly, thread by thread, because a damaged prize is worth less than a whole one, and because, fine, I'll say it, I'm not a monster about literally everything. My myriad body had digested a healing art of my master's years ago, so the work was clean. I ran a soft current of life force down the wound from her shoulder, and it closed as it went. No scar, no seam. When Han Qingyu's eyes fluttered open and she realized the injury that should have crippled her had simply stopped existing, I watched a very complicated set of feelings cross her face all at once. "Who are you?" she said, and then lower, alarmed at herself, one hand pressed to her own chest. "What did you do to me? Why does my heart feel like—" "That's the aura," I said, honestly, because there was no point hiding it. "You'll get used to it." What was happening to her was my supreme charm aura doing exactly what it says on the label. But I want to be fair to the woman, because she deserves it. It wasn't only the halo. She'd been raised cold and alone at the top of a dying sect, spent 75 years holding the whole world at sword's length, and then a stranger had plucked her out of the sky, healed her for free, tossed her a robe worth more than her entire mountain, and asked for nothing. The halo tips the scale. It doesn't invent the weight sitting on it. "Change of clothes," I said, and flicked her a 10th tier Dao robe. My cheapest one, the kind that shrugs off attacks from 3 realms up. "Yours is ruined." She stared at it like I'd handed her a small son. This is too precious. I can't. It's the worst robe I own. Keep it." I sat back on my heels. "Here's the situation, and I'll be straight with you because you're too sharp for anything else. Your old life had a script. Somebody else wrote it a long time ago, and it does not end well for you. A few good years, then you die propping up somebody else's legend. I'm offering you a different script, a bigger one. Quasi-emperor, great emperor, whatever you're actually willing to reach for." I let it sit. "Yours this time." If you want it, she wanted it. I'd love to claim it was all my jawline, but the truth is plainer and a little sad. I'd shown a lonely, trapped woman a door out of a cage she hadn't known she was standing in. She looked at the door for a long moment, then she walked through it. By the time the sun came up, she'd stopped calling me stranger, and I'd handed her the purple thunder bamboo she'd nearly died for because I'm a giver, and some things you finish while the story's still warm. Ding. Congratulations, host. Female lead Han Qingyu secured. Yang Wei's destiny value, -300. Great Luodao Pagoda, 300 of 2,000. There it was. The tower on my back ticked up. Every hero's dream I took made my own cheat stronger. The system had built me a perfect little machine, where their loss fed directly, mathematically, into my gain. But taking his girl was step 1, the crude step. Step 2 was the one I was proud of. I didn't just want Yang Wei weakened, I wanted him hated. So we walked into the Purple Cloud sect. Han Qingyu restored, radiant, sect leader again, on my arm, and we told everyone a story, a tragic one, about a mysterious black-robed attacker who had ambushed their leader and the Thunder Tiger both, shattered the sect's sacred mineral vein, slaughtered 3 demon kings, and vanished into the mist. That attacker, of course, was me. The dead demon kings were mine. The flattened mountain was mine. But the person the sect dragged up in chains to answer for all of it was a furious, bewildered boy in torn robes. "It was him!" Yang Wei roared, thrown down in the center of the Great Hall, pointing at me. "Completely correct, completely doomed. That man did all of it, not me. I killed the Thunder Tiger. I'm a hero, you have to." "So you admit," Han Qingyu said, cool as the far side of the moon, "to being at the battle site, and to killing a peak demon king. At blood refining." A pause, precise as a scalpel. "And yet you know nothing about the other 2 who died there the same afternoon?" He had no answer. Because the truth made him sound insane, and the lie made him sound guilty, and there was no third door. Watching a son of Destiny's own bragging get knotted into the rope around his neck was, I'll admit it, one of my favorite moments of the entire trip. There was exactly one person in that hall who believed him. An old alchemist named Mo Zihua, kind eyes, sharp mind, and according to the script in my head, destined to become Yang Wei's single most important early ally, the mentor whose faith would carry the boy through his first hard years. He stood up. He put his own body between the boy and the sentence. Sectmaster, look at him, the old man pleaded. He's a child, blood refining at most. How could he shatter a mineral vein? How could he kill 3 demon kings? Use your eyes, I beg you. And that was the moment I understood the old man had to go too. Not out of cruelty, out of arithmetic. He was a piece the universe had placed on the board specifically to lift Yang Wei up. So he came off the board. When the sentence came down and Mo Zihua called in his oldest friends to shield the boy, a wall of elders, decades of brotherhood, all of them stepping between Yang Wei and the blade because one good man asked them to, I decided the play had run long enough. The show's over, I said, and stood and raised one hand. Actors. Off the stage. I brought the human emperor banner down over that hall like a lid coming down on a pot. There was a great deal of noise for a very short time, and then there wasn't. When it lifted, the old alchemist and the friends who'd stood with him were gone, and the banner overhead hummed a little louder, a little fuller, purple light rolling slow across its 9 dragons. Ding! Mo Zihua and 6 others removed. Yang Wei has lost all support in the Purple Cloud sect. Villainous act, mass elimination, level 3. Villain value, plus 1,000. I felt the weight of that one. I'm going to keep telling you when I feel the weight, because if I pretend I didn't, none of the rest of this is worth listening to. Those weren't monsters. They were old men who chose loyalty over safety, and I'd wipe them out for the crime of being someone else's stepping stones. I told myself the number, the only number that helps. If they live, my mother burns. And I kept walking. The surviving elders had gone the specific ash gray of people whose entire understanding of the world just got revised in real time. Not one of them would meet my eye. Han Qingyu, who had a sect to keep face in front of, cleared her throat and scolded me. Guest elder, this behavior is highly improper, and I let her do it, and even bowed a little because a woman deserves to keep her dignity in front of her staff. Then the doors blew off their hinges. The sect's old founder came in on a wave of fury and pressure so thick the surviving elders staggered. Hanling Tian, a genuine body fusion powerhouse, the strongest thing this whole state had produced in 100 years, up off his deathbed and absolutely incandescent that someone had been butchering his people in his own hall. Who, he thundered, the words rattling the roof beams, dares slaughter the elders of my Purple Cloud sect? Then he got a real look at me, at my aura, at the thing I actually am, wearing the face of a 20-year-old and the robes of a guest. I have watched a great many powerful men do a great many undignified things. I have never, before or since, watched one hit his knees quite that fast. This old man was blind, Han Lingtian wailed, forehead cracking against the stone. Forgive my rudeness, your highness. Spare me for the sake of my disciple, for the sake of anything. I'll do whatever you ask. And to prove how sincere he was, he spun on the spot and cut down one of his own loyal elders, the very one who'd been shouting the loudest in his defense a breath ago, and offered me the body like a cat proudly presenting a dead bird on the doorstep. The math of power in that room reorganized itself in under 3 seconds. An hour ago, this old man had been a god to these people. Now he was an old servant kneeling behind a boy from the upper realm, eager to murder his own for one scrap of my approval. Get up, I told him almost gently. You're still the honored founder here. It wouldn't look right, an elder like you, groveling on the floor. He thanked me 9 separate times and rose to stand behind me like he'd been born to the spot. One hero's first love, taken. One hero's first mentor, gone. One hero's first stronghold, turned into my personal fan club, complete with a body fusion doorman. And I still hadn't laid eyes on the second boy. It was Meyer who caught me off guard, honestly. Not the boy, her. We were resting after the sect, and I turned around and her veil was simply gone, and the face under it wasn't the face of a cold, silent, professional bodyguard. It was a fox in human shape, bright, dangerous, ruinously pretty, the kind of face that starts wars in the storybooks and ends dynasties in the real ones. The mirror flipped a page for me, unasked. Meyer, age 1056. And down at the bottom, a line I didn't love at all. In the original novel, she stays loyal to me to the very last, and dies taking a killing blow meant for me from Yang Wei's blade. I looked at the woman who, in one version of the future, was going to catch a hero's sword through the heart so it wouldn't reach mine. You didn't have to hide your face this whole time, I said. His Majesty's trial suppressed my nature. She said it lightly. Her eyes weren't light at all. I don't have to hide anymore. Not from you. 1,000 years of holding something clamped down tight finally let off the leash. I'm not going to narrate the rest, except to tell you the cave was quiet for a while afterward, and neither of us minded. But I filed one thing away, Deep, in the place where I keep the load-bearing decisions. Nobody who loves me is dying in this story. Not her, not any of them, not this time. The book can say whatever it wants. I've read the book. I intend to argue with it, line by line, all the way to the end. Then it was back to work, because I had a second hero left to ruin, and this one was throwing himself a party. White Cloud City was hosting a grand tournament of prodigies. Every rising talent in the realm crammed into one gaudy capital, all of them jockeying for glory and patrons. My second target was somewhere in that crowd. Yiming, 18 years old, dirt poor, a chip on his shoulder the size of the mountains he'd been named after, and beside him, the whole reason he mattered. Her name was Bai Lei. Quick, bright, sharp-tongued, with a laugh that turned heads and a habit of skipping when she walked instead of walking. Yiming's childhood sweetheart, the girl he'd grown up beside after both their families fell apart. In his book, she's the heart of the entire thing, the beloved wife whose life and death the whole story is named after. She was also, and neither of them had any idea, not remotely human. I found the two of them getting humiliated at the finest inn in the city because they'd tried to book the best room with 2 spirit stones, and the best room cost 100 a night. The clerk was sneering, the lobby was laughing, and a preening blonde in fine robes was strolling in with a girl on each arm to twist the knife. The second prince of the White Cloud Empire, a bully named Gao Lei, who took one look at Bai Lei and announced out loud to the room that she'd look much better on his arm than on the poor boy's. The reason there was no room for Yiming, incidentally, is that I'd booked the entire top floor an hour earlier under a false name, so the whole humiliation was, in a very real sense, my fault. I felt great about it. Yiming seethed, his fists shook. Every insult carved another notch into him, and I watched his rage climb from a balcony box. The best box, obviously, the one everyone had wanted, and I thought, there it is. That's the ceiling and the floor of a Son of Destiny, both. They feel everything at maximum volume all the time. It makes them burn bright. It also makes them extremely, reliably easy to move. I could have just killed him. Quietly, cleanly, from the shadows. But quiet would have wasted the best part. So instead, I reached out with a card the mirror had given me. The original form card. A nasty little thing that strips a shapeshifter back to its true shape for 7 days. And I touched the girl. There was a soft pop, a curl of smoke. And where Bai Lei had been standing there was now a very small, very confused calico kitten, sitting in a puddle of her own abandoned clothes, looking around at a world that had suddenly gotten enormous, because that was her secret. Bai Lei was a 3-life demon cat, rare, precious, hunted since kittenhood for the treasure sitting inside her chest, saved once long ago by Yiming's father, hidden in human shape ever since. And her true form, right now, blinking up at me from the floor, was fluffy, furious, and roughly the size of my 2 hands. I scooped her up. I dropped a little puppet of woven spirit light into the spot where she'd been, so the boy wouldn't notice the swap for a while. And I strolled back to my stolen box to enjoy the rest of the show. Meow, said the kitten with enormous feeling, staring up at me in outrage. Hello to you too, I said, and settled in. Down below, the fight kicked off right on schedule. Yiming versus the prince, poisoned vines against tiger claws, the whole underdog set piece. And here is where the book and I finally parted ways for good. In the script, Yiming flicks out a hidden golden needle, paralyzes the arrogant prince, and wins clean. The prince, humbled and impressed, becomes his sworn friend, and later his ally, and later still one more sword in the army that marches on my family. Cute, heartwarming, absolutely, categorically not happening. So when Yiming's needle froze the prince mid-lunge, mid-sneer, I reached down through the roaring crowd with a thread of power the boy would never feel and finished what the needle had started. The prince fell. He didn't get up. From every seat in that inn, it looked exactly like the poor challenger had just murdered the second prince of the White Cloud Empire in cold blood. Ding! Your scheme has framed Yiming for the death of Gao Lei. He is now hunted by the White Cloud Empire and has lost a future ally. Yiming's destiny value, -100. The boy bolted, dragging what he thought was his sweetheart by the wrist, and he made it 2 alleys before he looked down and realized he was holding an empty robe and a fading scrap of light. I watched, from a very comfortable distance, as an 18-year-old sank to his knees in the mud with a fistful of empty cloth and howled her name at the sky, swearing to whatever was listening that he'd find her, and find the man who took her, and make him pay. Good luck, kid. The man who took her was up on the balcony with a drink, and she was asleep in his sleeve. The kitten, back in my box, had a great deal to say about all of this. She hissed. She swiped. She informed me, at length, in a language I did not speak but understood perfectly, that I was a villain, a scoundrel, and comfortably the worst thing that had ever happened to her. She wasn't wrong on a single count. But here's the part I didn't tell her, and didn't fully admit to myself yet either. That faint, absent-minded trickle of life force I kept leaking into her fur while I carried her around, the same warmth that would eventually become a running argument between us, was quietly, steadily doing something. She'd lost 2 of her 3 lives fleeing the people who murdered her mother, and under my hand, slow as a tide coming in, one of them had started, very quietly, to grow back. I told myself it was an accident. I've told myself a lot of things. I watched the tournament from the best seat in the house, which I'd stolen, with a beautiful sect leader on one side of me, a 1,000-year-old fox on the other, and one furious kitten in my lap who was, minute by minute, coming to terms with the fact that my lap was, against her every principle, extremely comfortable. That one, the cat seemed to say, going very still, staring down at a black-robed fighter climbing into the arena. That one moves like Brother Ming. That one was Brother Ming. Yiming had entered the tournament in disguise, hood up because winning it was his only remaining shot at a patron powerful enough to shield him from the Empire now hunting him for a murder he hadn't committed. And in his very first match, the bracket handed him the tournament favorite, Zhu Fang, second strongest prodigy in the whole realm, a big arrogant slab of a man with a flaming greatsword the size of a door and a habit of announcing his victories before they'd happened. Kid, Zhu Fang sneered, hefting the sword, you've got guts climbing up here. Shame they're about to be all over the floor. Yiming said nothing. He ate the opening exchange, gave ground, let the big man swing himself winded, and then a single tear slid down his cheek, dropped into his cupped palm, and fired across the arena like a shot from a cannon. It went through Zhu Fang before the man had finished laughing at him. Even immortals, the boy whispered, shed tears. The favorite folded. The crowd came out of its seats. I'll give Yiming that one, freely. It was a genuinely great move, and it earned a genuinely great roar, and for about 4 seconds an 18-year-old nobody stood in the center of that arena and tasted what it feels like to be a legend. Then he made the finals, and the finals were rigged because I had rigged them. His opponent was Yang Ruo'er, proud young daughter of the Dragon City Lin family, the single strongest clan in this world. The night before, a mysterious immortal had descended on her in her private courtyard, said not one word, hovered over her a moment, and left her cultivation quietly bumped up a full realm. She'd told nobody, saving the reveal for the grandest possible stage. The mysterious immortal was me, obviously. It was a slow evening, and I get bored. So when Yiming unloaded his ace in the final, a bolt of his own divine blood, his best and last card, the strike that was supposed to crown him champion and save his life, the little gift I'd planted in Ruo'er's forehead simply woke up and swallowed it whole, and the backlash dropped him where he stood. From every seat in the house, it looked like the exhausted challenger had finally fainted from blood loss. From my box, it looked like a boy walking full speed into a door I'd bolted shut the night before. He lost, and then I made it so much worse. I leaned very slightly toward the White Cloud Emperor, grieving father of a murdered prince, 3 seats down, desperate for a villain to hang it on, and I planted one small, reasonable question in the air between us. Strange, isn't it, that a fighter this good would hide his face? The Emperor, being no fool, followed the thought all the way to its terrible conclusion, marched down onto the sand, and tore the mask off his second-place finisher in front of the entire realm. Every dignitary who'd been in that inn recognized the face at once. It's him, the boy who killed the prince. One question, 10,000 witnesses. And in the space of a single breath, Yiming went from tragic runner-up to unmasked royal assassin, surrounded, cornered, half-conscious on the ground. I hadn't touched him. I just asked the right man the right thing at the right moment. That's the part nobody ever warns the heroes about. It isn't the monster in the shadows that gets you. It's the polite question from the man in the good seats. The Emperor's killing intent came down like a dropped mountain, and Yiming, pinned, doomed, out of tricks and out of allies, did the only thing he had left. He looked up at the empty sky and screamed for the one person in the world who had never once come. Father. And the sky answered. A giant axe fell out of nowhere and hammered the Emperor clear across the arena, and down came a man I'd read about but hadn't expected to meet this soon. Yi Gang, Yiming's father. Supposedly dead for years, in fact very much alive, in fact a full realm above anyone else present, wading in with a mountain-splitting axe and a face like a storm front, cutting the guards off his son and standing over the boy like the answer to a prayer. "Which of you," he roared, "dares slander my son?" For one bright, ringing second, it looked like the cavalry had finally arrived. The kitten in my lap went rigid, because Bai Lei was watching, and Bai Lei knew this man. This was Uncle Tang, the kind stranger who'd rescued her as a small child, who'd taken her in when she had no one, who'd let her mother buy their escape with her dying breath, except, and this was the part that broke her, right there in my lap, the whole time, the entire time, Uncle Tang had been strong enough to save her mother himself. He'd had this exact power, this integration realm strength for years. He simply hadn't spent it on a stranger. He'd let the woman die, scooped up the orphaned kitten as a little companion for his lonely son, and walked away clean. I felt the precise moment her heart came apart. She'd lost her mother twice now, once to the men who killed her, and once this instant in a sunlit arena to the man she'd spent her whole childhood believing had loved them both. Meyer, I murmured, the father's showing off, quietly. A ribbon of shadow slipped off my sleeve, and in the middle of Yi Gang's triumphant duel with two local powers, a single black flash crossed his back, and the invincible axe-wielder suddenly staggered, his aura guttering like a lamp in a draft. Who? He snarled, spinning, finding nothing but empty air. He never got to find out. Wounded, confused, and abruptly matchable, he grabbed his son and fled the arena in a streak of light, swearing revenge on a city, an empire, and a mysterious enemy he couldn't see. He didn't look up at the balcony once, where the enemy sat, scratching a heartbroken kitten very gently behind the ears. There, I told her, low, just for her. You saw it too. What he really is. The cat pushed her small head into my palm and didn't hiss. First time all day. I'm not going to pretend I did it for her. I crippled Yi Gang because I needed his son alive a little longer and his father weak and useful. But I looked down at that furry little wreck of a creature who had just watched her last good illusion die in the afternoon light, and I thought, these sons of destiny leave a trail of broken things behind them a mile wide, and not one of them ever turns around to look. At least I look. It has to count for something. Probably it doesn't, but something. There was a sect called the Crimson Sky Sword Pavilion. Second strongest in the realm, arrogant, cruel, and rich off other people's grief. And years ago, they were the ones who had hunted a 3-life demon cat through the wilds and torn the treasure out of her chest, a cat's heart being, it turns out, excellent fuel for a certain kind of breakthrough. That cat was Bai Lei's mother. I learned this the way I learned most things, from the mirror and the scripts, but I didn't need a system to read the kitten in my arms when our flying boat passed within range of those people. She went rigid. Every hair on her small body stood straight up, and a sound came out of her that had nothing playful left in it at all. Give her back, said the cat who couldn't speak, and I understood every word. So I asked her a question I don't ask very often. Do you think that place should burn? She looked up at me, genuinely startled that I'd bothered to ask her opinion about anything. Then she set both small front paws against the back of my hand and pressed down, hard, once. Then let's burn it. I didn't lift a finger for it, in the end. I had 4 kneeling Emperor-tier servants by now, powers I'd collected off the top of this world, the ones who'd chosen the knee over the grave, and I pointed them at the pavilion and took the leash off. Meyer went in with them for one specific errand, and she came back out with it cupped carefully in both hands. A small, 3-colored heart. Cold. Still. Locked away by the pavilion for years as a trophy. Bai Lei's mother. Or what was left of her. The kitten made a sound I'm not going to try to write down. She climbed out of my arms, sat down in front of that heart, and simply stopped moving. The specific total stillness of grief finally catching all the way up to you. And that's when Meyer, cold, dangerous, 1,000-year-old Meyer, who kills without a change in her breathing, knelt down on the deck beside a crying cat and said very gently, "Little sister, a 3-life demon cat isn't so fragile. Even from just the heart, with the right elixir, in the right hands, she can be brought back. A treasure of heaven and earth doesn't die so easily as all that." The kitten's head came up so fast she nearly tipped over. "Truly, truly, sister, truly, truly," Meyer said, and wonder of wonders, she smiled. I took that heart, and I put it away in the single safest place I own, a fold of my own system space that nothing in this world could reach into, and I made the cat a promise I fully intended to keep, not because it profited me, not because the system chimed, but because somewhere between the tournament and the ashes of that pavilion, this furious little animal had stopped being a game piece to me and started being one of mine. And nobody hurts what's mine and stays comfortable about it. The pavilion's souls went into the banner, its wealth went into my storage. Its long reign of cruelty over this corner of the world ended in a single afternoon, and I did not lose 1 minute of sleep over it, partly because for once the people I'd erased had genuinely earned it, and partly because the cat slept curled against my chest that night without a single hiss, and that, somehow, weighed more than any of it. When the 7 days ran out and the spell wore off and Bai Lei turned back into a young woman, furious, red-eyed, poking me in the chest and calling me the worst man who had ever lived, I tossed her a robe and let her yell herself out. "You bad, bad man," she said, voice cracking. "You turned me into a cat. You put me in your pocket. You carried me around like a coin purse. I avenged your mother," I said, "and I'm going to bring her back. You can hit me if it helps." She didn't hit me. She stood there a long moment instead, this girl who'd lost every single person she'd ever had, looking at the strange, terrible man who had wrecked her whole world and then, for no profit and no reason, gone and torn down the people who murdered her mother. Why? She said finally, very small. Why would you do that? For me, I'm nobody to you. Because I felt like it, I said, which was the truth, and also the least honest way to say it. Now stop crying, you're getting fur on my good robe, you're staying with us, that part's already decided. She wiped her face with the back of her wrist, and after a while she nodded. Not a wife, not a prize, not a chapter in anyone's love story. Just a stray I'd picked up who had decided, somewhere along the road, to stay picked up. Meyer took her under a wing and set about teaching her which of us she could trust, and the answer, apparently, came out to me, which tells you Meyer's judgment is considerably worse than advertised. But I still had a father to finish, and a hero who wouldn't stay down, and a dead ocean waiting for me at the bottom of the map. The Tang boys came for revenge, of course. They always do. Father and son crept into the Empire's heart to assassinate the Emperor who'd hunted them, and I was already there, waiting, because I'd read the book and I knew the page and the hour. I let the terrified Emperor scramble off with his life, and I stepped out to meet the two of them alone. The Gu family prince, Yiming choked, the last few pieces slamming into place at once. It was you, all of it, the kitten, the prince, the tournament. You've been standing behind me this whole time. Took you long enough. His father laughed at me. A full integration realm master, laughing at a boy who read as peak void refining. No matter how many treasures you've stolen, little thief, in front of a real power, you are an ant. Meyer stepped out of my shadow, and Yi Gang's laugh died in his throat because he recognized the exact aura that had gutted his strength in the arena. I'll be quick about how this went, because it was not a fight. Yi Gang had built his entire late-life power on the corpse of a spirit treasure, the immortal vine, a fragment of some great being from the upper realm that had gained a mind of its own down here. It was keeping him alive well past the point where he should have died, stitching him back together every time. I took him apart, patiently, until the vine ran dry. At the very end, out of everything else, he pulled the last of it into his hand, a small, withered length of vine, and moved to crush it into himself to survive one more minute. Ruier, he wept to it. Forgive me, because that was what the vine was. Yi Ming's mother. The love Yi Gang had once cracked the heavens for, reduced now to a single branch he was about to eat to save his own skin. I ended him before he could. Cleanly. The way you put down a thing that's dangerous and suffering at the same time, and the vine spirit, freed finally from the man who would have devoured her, took shape one last time, a gentle figure, her gaze soft, and she bowed. To me, of all the people in that room. This humble spirit thanks you, young master, she said, for setting me free. In my next life, I'll repay the kindness. Then she scattered into light and was gone, and I stood there a second or two longer than I strictly needed to, holding the last fading warmth of a mother who had just thanked the man who'd orphaned her son. There's a version of me that doesn't feel that one. I keep looking for him. He never shows up when I need him. Yiming had one prize left in his book, the Sea Marsh Kingdom, the sealed legacy of a dead sea god, the trump card that was supposed to launch him from nobody straight into the upper tiers of cultivation, and to open it, he needed a key, specifically, a woman. Her name was Meng Ying, a guardian priestess who had spent her whole long life waiting for the sea god's chosen heir, drawn across the ocean by a prophecy that pointed her straight at Yiming. She arrived, saw the half-dead boy I'd left on my deck, and came at me like weather in a mermaid's shape, trident first, screaming about blasphemy and divine punishment. The mirror told me she wasn't important enough to make the leaderboard. So I made it quick, and the banner took her soul, and I felt the shape of the key I actually needed settle cold into my hand. I'm aware of how that reads. She spent 400 years faithfully waiting for a hero, and I killed her to use her as a doorknob. I don't have a joke for that one. Some of these I just carry. The kingdom itself was a drowned blue palace, ancient and silent, all faded glory and cold water. I armored up before I stepped inside like the paranoid man I am, which is to say I put on every protective treasure my family had ever crammed into my luggage. My mother's, my father's, both uncles, both grandfathers. Bracelets, rings, pendants, a jade token from a great aunt I've met twice. When you're about to poke a god, you accept in advance that you're going to look ridiculous doing it. Then the god woke up. He rose out of the deep in a blue robe, eyes like the bottom of the ocean, pouring off the kind of divine pressure that had been designed over uncounted eons to drop mortals to their knees in helpless worship. Human. The word rolled through the drowned hall like a tide. You bear no mark of mine. Why have you come into my domain? Hand over your sea god essence, I said. The one your heir was supposed to inherit. I'll be taking it. There was a long, offended silence, the kind of silence a mountain would produce if you walked up and asked it for its wallet. Boy, he thundered, with your pitiful cultivation, you dare. Here is the thing about a god with no body, all that pressure, all that ancient majesty, all that terror ground fine over 10,000 years of being worshipped. It only works on people who can be pressured. I'm not from this world. My fate doesn't render on his screen. So I did the one thing that had never been done to him. I ignored the theatrics entirely, walked past the light show, put my hand flat on his statue, and started siphoning the source out of it like a man draining a tank of gas. That got his attention. He couldn't stop me directly, so he did the desperate thing. Rather than wait one more day for a worthy heir, he decided to become his own heir. His spirit poured into the nearest available body, Yi Ming unconscious at my feet, and the boy's eyes snapped open, blazing, and his cultivation rocketed upward through 4 whole realms in as many breaths, all the way to the Tao Palace, the strongest thing this small world could physically contain without cracking. Ha ha ha. God and boy laughed with one grinning mouth. Goo family prince! You never saw this coming! Even at the very edge of death, the chosen one turns the board. A trident of gathered ocean rose behind them, dripping tsunamis. And when you're dead, little thief, I'll enjoy every woman you drag down here with you, one at a time, and make them watch each other. I have heard a great many villain speeches in my life. I have delivered a few good ones myself. And I have learned, through repeated field research, that there is nothing in all of creation more reliably, immediately fatal than a son of destiny standing at the exact peak of his own confidence. I crossed the hall before he finished the sentence and put my hand on his head. My myriad body has one specific, ugly trick I call the gluttonous hand. It doesn't strike, it takes. The sea god's borrowed power, his stolen realm, the essence he'd hoarded in that statue for 1,000 years, all of it came pouring up my arm and out of the boy, and Yi Ming dropped in one sickening lurch right back to what he'd been, a hunted teenager with no plot armor left and nothing in the tank. Ding, sea god essence acquired. Yi Ming has lost the Tao Palace opportunity, luck value below 50, chosen one status, revoked, and then the sea god, dying, out of power and out of options and left with nothing but spite, did the thing I'll remember about him the longest. He detonated, not at me, at his own domain. The drowned kingdom began to rupture and expand, and the ocean above it, the whole prefecture, the entire sea he'd ruled and been worshipped by for generations, began to fold in and swallow itself. Hundreds of millions of lives out there under the water, his own people, the faithful who'd prayed to him since before their grandmothers were born. It's your fault, he laughed as he went out. All of it, every last one of them dies because of you, thief. Carry that. Carry it forever. He was wrong about whose fault it was. He drowned them. He chose it, at the very end, freely, to hurt me. The karma of it slid right off me the way water slides off glass. The one time in my whole life I've been grateful to be a stranger to this world's heaven, but I stood on my deck and watched a sea go dark, and I did not feel like glass. I made Yi Ming watch it with me. I want to be honest about how cold that was, because it was the coldest thing I did in that whole realm. Colder than the framing, colder than the killing. I held the boy up by the collar and made him look at the drowning world his god had murdered, and then I turned my face to the heaven of this place and I said loudly, clearly, that here, right here, stood the man responsible for the deaths of hundreds of millions, the chosen heir of the sea god. And the karma the sea god had shrugged so casually onto his successor came down out of the sky and wrapped around Yi Ming like chains of iron. His mind broke somewhere in there. He begged. He'd given me everything, he said, sobbing. His father, his girl, his prizes, his fate, everything. What more could I possibly want from him? What I wanted was for my mother to grow old. And this boy, grown up, was one of the hands that reached for her throat, so I ended it. Fast. He died furious and uncomprehending, which is exactly how all of them die, because the universe spends their whole lives whispering in their ears that they're special, and it never once teaches them the single thing that might have saved them, that someone was always going to have to be the villain of their story. And the universe cast that part before either of us drew breath. Ding, son of destiny. Yi Ming eliminated. Reward, golden treasure chest, and the origin of the Azure Heaven Overlord body. The Overlord body. My second uncle's exact physique, the 10th ranked constitution in all the heavens, a mortal enemy of the 9th ranked line by nature, a gift I'd pulled, whole, out of a dead teenager. I felt it settle into my blood, felt my own power tick up another hard notch, and I thought about the boy who'd carried it, and the sea still going quiet and black behind us, and I didn't say anything at all for a long, long time. One hero truly and finally down, one left, and the one left was the one I actually needed alive. Yang Wei, my last living hero, was busy being led around by the nose, and he had no idea whose hand was on the rope. His trusted master, the ghost of an old fire cultivator riding in his skull, the one who'd been feeding him strength and courage since the Purple Cloud Mountains, was, by this point, entirely mire. Weeks ago, she'd slipped a sliver of her soul into the old ghost, and now she steered the boy wherever I needed him, fed him exactly enough power to stay useful, and let his faith in his own mentor quietly rot from the inside out. He thought he was chasing his destiny across the world. He was on my leash. He just didn't know he was wearing a collar. His destiny this time was a volcano. The endless volcano was where the script promised Yang Wei would claim a legendary flame, the violet nether divine underworld fire, a top 30 strange flame in all the 3,000 realms, the kind of fuel that could leap a fire cultivator up whole tiers overnight, and along with the flame, a woman. The Snake Queen, Long Wei, mid-transformation in a hidden chamber at the volcano's molten heart. Naturally, by the time Yang Wei arrived, I was already inside, and half the realm was kneeling in the ash outside my flying boat. That part had become routine. You destroy 2 royal states in a single month, and word gets around. Even the proud demon clans folded. The Fire Elephant clan's young master started to bluster, took one look at the 4 human overlords already on their knees toward my hull, and dropped to the ground so fast he left a dent. There's an art to a good entrance, and mine had gotten very good. Inside, I sent a little rage down the leash for Yang Wei to chew on. I'd picked up a lovely tool by then, a collector that converted a hero's fury directly into villain value, and Yang Wei produced fury the way the sun produces light, free and constant and blinding. And while he was busy losing a grudge match to a Dragon City prodigy who'd once crippled his father, I went and found the queen. Long Wei was everything the mirror had promised. The highest-ranked woman I'd met in this entire realm, coiled in a chamber of living purple fire, refining a flame that could burn a saint to ash, radiating a cold, imperial disdain that would have been genuinely intimidating on anyone who wasn't me. "Human!" she hissed the instant I walked in, purple eyes narrowing. "How dare you set foot in—" "Queen," I agreed, stepping over the threshold. "How dare I? I'll keep this part short because it was between 2 consenting adults, and it is frankly none of your business." The flame she was wrestling was wild and half-feral, the sort of power that overwhelms whoever tries to tame it and burns out the ones who fail. I helped her tame it, and somewhere in the process of not being burned alive together, 2 people who had both spent their entire lives armored head to toe against a world that had only ever taken from them, the armor came off. She came out of it a full realm stronger, riding a bloodline that brushed the edge of sainthood, and absolutely, furiously refusing to admit she'd enjoyed a single second of any of it. "Don't get smug, Zhangfei," she informed me, chin up, tail flicking, currently folded into my arms in a manner that rather undercut the entire speech. "I am a queen. I am simply not in top form at the moment. You haven't been in top form for days, your majesty." Silence. That is treason. I was fond of her instantly. There is something deeply restful about a woman who threatens to conquer you before breakfast every single morning and never once means it. But the reason I'll remember Long Wei isn't the flame, or the sparring, or the way she said my name like a curse she was fond of. It's what she was carrying underneath all that ice. She was a half-blood, human and demon both, a bloodline that had reverted against all odds to something ancient and royal, and her own clan had never once let her forget the half part. They'd crowned her queen, yes, draped her in status and titles, and the entire time, the ancient elder who had raised her, a snake named Long Hai, had been growing her like a crop in a field. Her awakening bloodline was the real harvest. The throne was just the fence he'd built around the field to keep the crop safe until it ripened. He'd murdered her parents to clear the ground. He'd raised the orphan on warm words and cold lies. And he'd waited 200 patient years for the day he could reach in and take everything she was, the power, the bloodline, the awakened strength, and pour it into himself for his own breakthrough, and keep her as a trophy on his arm besides. I told her. All of it, flat, no cushioning, because she was far too sharp for cushioning, and because she deserved the truth more than she deserved comfort. She went very quiet for a long time, and then she said, in a voice with no royalty left in it at all, "Just a daughter. Take me home." So I took her home. I stood back and let her handle it, because some kills don't belong to me. Long Hai had revived himself to his absolute prime for the occasion, all counterfeit divine beast power and gloating certainty, wrapped in a crimson python's shape, so sure the caged bird would come home and kneel one final time. He looked at Long Wei walking in beside me, and his eyes went cold. "Long Wei," he said, all false warmth. "Why did you take so long? And who is this? You brought a stray back to the clan. A human?" "This is my honored guest, ancestor," she said, ice forming on every word. "You will speak of him with respect." That cracked his mask a little. "You forget yourself, girl. You've broken through to body fusion and suddenly you think you can take me for granted? Everything you have, I gave you. Everything I gave, I can take back. I've come home," Long Wei said, and her aura began to rise, "to learn the truth of how my mother and father died, and I think, ancestor, that you already know I know." He stopped pretending after that. There's a point where the mask costs more than it's worth, and he reached it. Then you have no reason left to exist, he said, and the whole sky over the clan turned crimson as he pulled his stolen power up into a tower. Such a waste. You were so nearly ripe. 200 years of care, and you'd rather dig up old graves than thank me. Kneel, Long Wei. Kneel and let me collect what I'm owed. The debt, she said, of a murdered mother and father cannot be paid by kneeling, and she unfolded, not into the crimson counterfeit he wore, but into the real thing, a genuine heaven-swallowing divine python, vast and true, the article standing over the forgery. The difference between them settled the entire question in about 4 seconds. His stolen power guttered, his borrowed prime cracked down the middle. And at the end, of course, he begged. They always beg, reaching for the 200 years of raising her like a receipt he could hand back at the counter. Long Wei, daughter, remember the kindness, remember all those years I remember, she said, the man who killed my parents and smiled at me over their graves for 2 centuries. She burned him down. Him and every elder who had stood by and watched her parents die and said nothing. And when it was finished, she lifted her head to the sky over her broken, treacherous, complicated little clan, and her voice finally cracked all the way through. Father, mother, I've avenged you. Afterward, I asked her gently, for me, whether she still wanted to protect these people, the clan that had used her as a crop, the elders who had looked away while she was orphaned. She was quiet a long while. Then, I grew up here. This blood is theirs too. When they call me their queen, some of them even mean it. She looked out over all of them, bowing to her now, not one of them worth the ash on her hands. They're foolish, they're a burden, but because of them, I have a home. So, yes, I'll protect it. I set her back on her throne with my own hands, and I meant what I said next more than I usually mean anything. Then I'll protect your home, but you ought to think about building a new one too, with me. She called me insufferable. Her ears went pink when she said it, which, if you don't speak snake, is a firm and unambiguous yes. 4 had become 5. And under all of it, I could feel the shape of my own strength changing, the flame and the overlord body and the world I was one hero away from claiming, all of it climbing toward the Dao Palace, close enough now to reach up and put my fingers on the door. But first there was a tower to open. The great Luodao Pagoda, the golden 9-story treasure that ran on the fate of dead heroes, finally clicked its first lock, and I stepped inside a floor where time itself was folded, where 1 hour outside was 10 hours in. There was a mindless tentacle beast guarding the place, which I killed because there is always a mindless tentacle beast guarding these places. It's practically zoning law. But the real prize was what the floor handed me on my way out, and it changed everything about how efficient my work became. The Heaven and Earth Furnace, another primordial grade treasure, and the single most useful murder weapon I have ever owned. It refines anything, not just metal and ore, cultivation, physique, bloodline, soul, all of it, fed in one end and rendered down into neat portable little pills. Where the banner ate souls, the furnace ate everything else. Put the two of them together and you have the perfect closed machine for the exact work I do. A person goes in one end and profit comes out the other, and nothing is wasted. I stood there in that folded time chamber holding a furnace that could melt down a man's entire existence into a pill I could swallow, and I understood clearly that I had just become something even I found a little hard to look at directly. I looked at it anyway, and then I went to go use it on the last hero standing. Yang Wei had gone home, not to the grand upper realm clan he dreamed about, to the shabby little branch family in Kanglin City that had ignored his crippled father for years and only started fawning over the boy once he got strong. And in the ground beneath that family's ancestral hall sat their last secret, a blood inheritance, a way to gather the entire clan's bloodline into a single chosen heir and rocket him up the ladder in one leap. In the script, Yang Wei uses it. He refines his own worthless relatives down into fuel, forges a flawless Dao body out of them, and climbs. The book presents this as a triumph, his grim, decisive, do what must be done moment. So I got there first, and I did the thing I still don't have a clean joke for. I turned the furnace on the whole clan. The grandfather who'd neglected the boy for a decade, the uncles who'd sneered at his crippled father, all of them, drawn into the furnace and rendered down before they fully understood what was closing over them, not out of cruelty, I want to be precise about this, but out of arithmetic. A bloodline in my furnace is a bloodline that will never ever grow a hero. I left the walls of the compound standing and the halls swept empty, and I kept exactly one person in that entire clan alive. Lin Guang, Yang Wei's father, the one relative the boy actually loved, his single soft spot in the whole cold world. Because I'm not sentimental, I'm strategic, and a soft spot you've captured alive is worth 10 times a soft spot you've buried. Down in the ancestral land, the ghost of some long-exiled Lin ancestor rose up and offered Yang Wei the inheritance, and the fine print of it was this: the blood pool needed a close relative's essence to catalyze it, or the raw power would tear the heir apart from the inside out. 2 ounces, from within 3 generations. And Yang Wei, cold, ambitious, decisive Yang Wei, agreed on the spot without a flicker of hesitation because he assumed there was a whole clan of relatives upstairs waiting to be bled. There wasn't. I'd already rendered every one of them. There was exactly one close relative left alive in the entire world, his father. I watched from the shadows as the boy's stolen power began to bloat and burn with nothing to anchor it. I watched the ancestor's ghost slowly realize the catalyst was gone, and I watched Yang Wei's face. I made a point of watching his face, as he understood piece by piece that the only close blood left in all of creation to save his own life belonged to the one man he loved. He screamed. He bargained with the ghost, with the sky, with himself. He wept blood, and at the very bottom of himself, at the absolute floor, he was going to do it. He was going to spend his father to save his own skin, because that is what the ladder does to the ones who climb it hardest. It files them down, rung by rung, until there's nothing left they won't feed to it. I didn't even let him have that. No, no, little brother, I said, stepping out of the dark, and I put on the kind expression, the gentle one, because the kind expression made it so much worse, and I wanted it to be worse. I can't let you carry the shame of killing your own father. Let me. It's what family's for. And I did it for him. I ended Lin Guang myself and fed the essence to the furnace, so that the boy would spend the rest of his very short life knowing his father died right in front of him, for nothing, by the hand of the man who had already taken everything else. He came apart after that, threw himself at the furnace on the ghost's frantic advice: destroy the treasure, save yourself, and the furnace simply drank the blood pool power and the ancestor's soul right along with it, and left Yang Wei a hollow, blood-red husk saddled with every side effect of the inheritance and not one of its gifts. And that was the moment his ghost master, my Meyer, still wearing the old fire cultivator's shape, stopped pretending. She seized what was left of his body through the soul fusion she'd been quietly building for weeks and took the wheel, which was the entire point. I still needed Yang Wei. The spirit of this world was hiding from me, and it had chosen this boy as the one it would surface to save, so I kept his broken body walking, a bloodhound with my shadow at the reins, and I pointed him at the last thing I'd crossed a realm to take. I know exactly what all of that makes me. I made a boy watch me kill his father. I turned his family into pills. I strung his corpse up on my leash and used it to sniff out treasure like a hunting dog. And here's the part I can't dress up in a joke, so I won't try. I do it again, every single step, because somewhere up in the 3,000 realms, at that exact moment, my mother was probably yelling at my second uncle about something profoundly stupid, and my father was probably pretending not to smile at it, and this boy, this specific boy, grown all the way up, takes that away in 1 out of 14 million tomorrows. You want to know the real horror of being the designated villain? It isn't the things you do. Anybody can do. A terrible thing. Cowards do them by the thousand. It's that you understand, with perfect clarity, exactly why you're doing them, and you're right. There was one more woman in Yang Wei's book, and she came looking for him with a jade pendant clutched in her fist and hope written all over her face. Lin Zi, and she was a bigger deal than she knew. She'd been raised down here in the lower realm believing she was just another Kanglin cousin, childhood friend to a boy named Yang Wei, nobody special. But she was actually the lost daughter of the Dragon City Lin family, the real upper realm power, abandoned in the lower realm as an infant when her father was clawing his way to the top of the clan, then recalled years later and dressed up as their prized goddess once he'd won. She'd made a 5-year promise to Yang Wei before she left. And the instant his life fell apart, the little safeguard she'd planted on him triggered, and she dropped everything, her clan, her title, her father's plans, and came running back down to save her childhood sweetheart. She arrived at Kanglin City to find a graveyard, empty halls, a dead clan, and one dying old man in the wreckage who told her, with his failing last breath, that Yang Wei had become a demon and slaughtered his whole family for power. The dying old man was Meyer, in a borrowed face. Every word was a blade, aimed with a surgeon's care at the exact spot where it would do the most damage. By the time Lin Zi left that ruin, the boy she had crossed worlds to rescue was already a monster in her mind, and she had no idea the story had been placed in her hands on purpose, by the very man responsible for all of it. Then she caught up with the real thing, and the real thing was worse than the lie, because the body wearing Yang Wei's face was being driven by my shadow now, and it was out draining a demon clan to keep itself walking when Lin Zi found it, elbow deep in exactly the kind of horror the fake dying man had described. Her guardian, a fierce old woman named Wood Granny, Dao Palace Realm and sharp as a drawn blade, moved instantly to put the monster down. Lindsay stopped her. Some last thread of the girl she used to be couldn't let it happen, not without knowing why, and that single hesitation is the gap I walked into. The Ghostmaster lunged for Lindsay, a fresh body, a hostage, a bargaining chip, anything, and I stepped between them and shielded her, calm as a spring morning, for all the world a passing immortal who'd arrived in the nick of time to save an innocent from a demon. You can guess how the aura landed. 30% on sight, double for a woman, a hero's own beloved, falling for the villain who had personally engineered her entire tragedy in the exact moment he rescued her from it. Wood Granny took one look at me and went pale in the specific way of a servant doing rapid, terrible math, because she recognized me, the Gu family's young prince, a name known in every corner of the 3,000 realms, and she understood the shape of the situation immediately. Lindsay was betrothed, arranged by her father, years ago, to a fading imperial clan called the Wang family, a debt of gratitude for helping him seize his throne. But an imperial clan is a candle held up next to the bonfire that is the immortal ancient Gu family. When the Gu prince takes an interest in your daughter, you do not sit him down and explain about a prior engagement. You thank the heavens on your knees and start drafting the apology to the people you're about to jilt. So Wood Granny, kneeling in the ashes, offered me the girl herself, as an apology, as compensation for the trouble, and I accepted, and I sent word up to the girl's father, a man named Lin Fei, to come and meet me at my family's home to discuss the future. Lindsay hated every second of it, loudly, which I found genuinely charming. She called me a scoundrel and a lecher and refused to be my little maid at least 9 times an hour, but I'd shown her the truth about the boy she'd loved. Let her watch, with her own 2 eyes, the demon he'd become, and grief has a way of clearing space in a heart that nothing else can. The childhood image faded. Something new moved into the empty room. Some people, she admitted to me one evening, sulking, pointedly not looking at me, can spend 10 years by your side and mean less than someone you met at first sight. That's the halo talking, I said. Honest, for once. It is not, she snapped, going scarlet, which meant it was partly the halo and partly not, which is exactly how these things always go. I didn't feel good about that one either, if you're still keeping the list. She came down to this world to save someone. She left having watched me kill the boy she came for, wearing the face of the girl who would help me do it. But I'll say the one thin thing I can say in my own defense. I never lied to her about what I was. I told her plainly more than once that I was the villain of the story. She decided to come along anyway. That's the thing nobody warns you about when you're the bad guy with the golden aura and the good jaw. It isn't that people can't see what you are. It's that a great many of them look right at it and stay. The world spirit finally surfaced at a place called the Kengshuan Spring, and when it did, it lit the whole realm up like a second sunrise. Every power in the world came running. But the spring was pouring out raw spiritual energy at a concentration that unmade anyone who got too close. Cultivators walked toward it and simply dissolved, their bodies boiled away by an abundance they were never built to survive. So the great forces gathered at the edges and stared, helpless and furious, at a prize not one of them could reach. My boat sailed straight in. The tide that unmade lesser men parted around a primordial grade hull like it was embarrassed to have tried. And there, burrowing down toward the heart of it, was Yang Wei, or the husk of him, my shadow at the reins, doing the one job I'd kept him breathing for. The spirit had chosen him. It would surface for him. He was the one key in all creation I couldn't just melt down, because I needed the door it opened. He cracked the last shield around the spirit's core in a spray of light, reached for the small jade embryo cradled inside with a howl of triumph, and it floated right past his fingers and drifted, calm as anything, toward me instead. Of course it did. A world spirit is a thing of pure fate. And I am the one man in creation its heaven is physically unable to hand it to. In that last desperate fight, the boy even managed a real breakthrough, crushing what remained of his Ghostmaster's soul to fuel it, which meant Meyer's old disguise died, at the very end, by Yang Wei's own hand. A tidy little irony. I appreciated it on a professional level. He came up out of it berserk. Blood red, screaming, no words left in him, burning the raw essence of his heavenly flame divine body, a physique ranked in the top 10 of all the heavens, the fire in it enough to level an entire state if he let it all go. Gu Yun! He roared, the way he'd roared my name a dozen times across this whole realm in that same cracked register of pure hate. I am the darling of destiny. Whatever cannot kill me only makes me stronger. You're going to damage the merchandise, I said, because that was, genuinely, my only concern in the moment. That divine body was going into my furnace intact, and here he was setting fire to it out of spite. I couldn't have that. I hit him once, not hard by my standards. Void refining against a body fusion breakthrough, 3 full realms of gap running the wrong direction, And it didn't matter in the slightest, because the rules that bound the heroes their whole lives never once bound me. They crossed boundaries to win. I just crossed them further, and I didn't have to bleed to do it. Then I opened the furnace, and I fed him in. I pulled his cultivation. I pulled the heavenly flame divine body out whole and perfect and mine. I pulled the last of his destiny out into one bright little pill, and when it was finished, there was a hollow, ordinary young man kneeling on the ground where a son of destiny used to stand. No power, no plot armor, no fate, just a boy, blinking, at the very bottom of everything, with nothing left in his hands. He groveled. He offered to be my dog. He promised me every woman I'd already taken, as if they were his to give away. And underneath the groveling, I could see him doing the math, already, plotting the comeback, waiting for his 30 years east 30 years west turn of fortune. Because a hero never truly believes, not even at the very end, that the story might simply be over and he might simply have lost. I could have finished it myself, but there was someone standing beside me who'd earned the choice far more than I had. You said you'd do it yourself, I reminded Lindsay, quietly. The boy who slaughtered his own family. The demon you crossed a world to stop. She stepped forward. This girl he'd grown up beside, the one good thing left from his childhood, and for one bright, terrible second his face lit up. Lindsay, come to save him at the end after all. Then her sword went through him. Once. Clean. And the light went out of his eyes, still wearing that last look of pure disbelief. They always die surprised. 14 million tomorrows told every one of them he was special, chosen, protected, and not a single tomorrow ever prepared him for the afternoon the story just quietly said, no. Ding, son of destiny, Yang Wei eliminated. Reward, 2 golden treasure chests. Both heroes down. Truly, finally, both of them. The whole reason I'd come to this world, erased, folded into pills and treasure and a tower on my back 3 floors taller than the day I arrived. Lindsay stood over the body with her sword still out, and then, very quietly, she began to turn the blade toward her own throat. Guilt. She'd killed the boy she came to save. That kind of thing hollows out the soft ones from the inside. I knocked the blade out of her hand and pulled her into me before she could argue with it. Don't, I said, and I didn't say it gently because gentle wouldn't have reached her. You don't get to pay for someone else's crimes. That was Yang Wei's story, start to finish. You're mine now, and I do not allow the people who belong to me to die for other people's sins. She cried into my robe for a while. I let her. It was, I'm well aware, an enormously hypocritical thing for me to say. The man who had personally arranged every last sin she was weeping over, holding her and telling her none of them were hers to carry. But hypocrisy is a luxury, and I decided a long time ago that I was going to be the specific kind of villain who could afford it. I took her home too. What's one more? And then, finally, with both heroes cold and the whole world holding its breath, I went to collect the thing I'd crossed a realm to take. The spirit of an entire world, it turns out, looks like a very small girl. I brought the jade embryo back to the boat and set it down on the deck, and it unfolded on its own, light gathering, thickening, resolving into a child. Big, solemn eyes. A face like a porcelain doll that a god had made on his best day and then been too proud to ever sell. She couldn't have looked more than 6 years old, and she stared up at me, this thing older than the mountains I'd been fighting on, and she shrank back. You, she said, in a tiny soft voice, have a scary smell. Oh, said Bai Lei instantly, because a 3-life demon cat has precisely 0 defense against something that small and that cute. Young master, can I hold her? Look at her little face. Not yet, I said, and I crouched down to the spirit's level, which is not a thing I do. I do not get down on my knees for emperors or kings or gods with drowned oceans. I did it for her. Here's the situation I was actually standing in, underneath the soft moment. This little spirit was the final piece of my whole mission. The fusion spirit my entire family had sent me down into a dying world to claim, the foundation stone for everything I was about to become. In the script, Yang Wei refines her the ordinary way, crushes her down into raw material, forges himself a Tao body, and never once notices she has a mind at all. Never knows he melted a person down into fuel. I was not going to do it that way, and not because it was less efficient. Because I looked at her, and my charm aura and my villain aura were fighting over her in real time, the gold ones saying trust him, the orange ones saying run, and a thing that small should not have to stand in the middle of that fight alone. I'm not going to hurt you, I said. What's your name? Did you pick one for yourself? She hesitated. Then, with the enormous teetering dignity that only very small creatures can manage. Xiao Xiao. I chose it myself. That's a good name. You chose well. I meant it, and she heard that I meant it, and the shrinking back eased half a step. Xiao Xiao, I have to ask you something, and I want you to know you're allowed to say no. Do you understand me? No is a real answer here. She nodded, uncertain, watching my face. I'd like to become one with you. It would make me stronger. I won't lie to you about that. But it would also let you grow up alongside me, in the light, instead of sleeping alone down here in the dark for another 1,000 years. And it only works if you truly want it. No forcing. That's the one rule, and it's yours to hold. Behind me, I could feel the women go quiet. This was apparently not the domineering young master they'd signed on with. Han Qingyu told me later that in that moment I'd looked less like a conqueror and more like a tired father coaxing a stubborn kid into a bath. Xiaoxiao studied me with those enormous eyes, weighing something far, far heavier than her size. The scary smell is still there, she said slowly. But underneath it there's a warm one. Why are there two? Because I'm two things at once, I said. Most people are. The trick is knowing which one you point at the people you care about. I held out my hand, palm up, and left it there. Do you want to stay down here by yourself? Or do you want to come up into the light with me? That decided it. She reached out one tiny hand and set it in mine. Xiaoxiao believes in Big Brother, she said, and that is the whole secret of a perfect fusion, the thing that made my myriad body the quiet terror of the heavens. It needs the other side to hold absolutely nothing back, and a child who has decided to trust you holds nothing back at all. Her light poured into me, gentle, without a single scrap of resistance, and I guided it the way you'd guide a kid's hand on a brush, careful of every stroke, mindful of every thread. When it was done, she was asleep somewhere deep in my core, and the power of an entire world was beating quietly under my skin like a second heart. Ding. Perfect fusion achieved. Body fusion realm complete. Host now stands one step from the Tao Palace, backed by the full strength of the Azure Profound Realm. I swallowed a peak-grade pill to keep the tidal wave of new energy from tearing the whole realm apart around me, and I sat with it, and I felt myself change, tear the way a river changes when the snow finally melts upstream. Everything downstream rising at once. I'd done it. The thing 3 generations of my family had tried and failed at. A world spirit, taken whole, taken willing, folded into me for good. When I walked back into the Gu clan, no elder would ever again dare to ask who came after my father, and I hadn't melted down a single frightened child to manage it, which, given everything else currently written on my ledger, the framed boys and the drained clans and the drowned sea, felt like a strange and small thing to be proud of. I was proud of it anyway. I'm allowed a few of those. There was a mountain of loot to sort through besides. 4 golden chests cracked open at once, and out of them came an armory. More fragments of an ancient emperor's armor, 8 of 10 pieces now, and when it was whole, nothing below an emperor would scratch me. The immaculate divine body, the 20th ranked constitution in the heavens, the one that erases every bottleneck and drinks spiritual energy 100 times over, the exact treasure my family had scoured the 3,000 realms for and never found, and I'd pulled it out of a dead teenager's kill reward. And one long box that hummed with bloodlust and immortal power both, the Purgatory Demon Blade, a genuine immortal artifact that kills anything below Emperor rank the instant it touches the hilt. I also picked up 2 new names on the way out, and a chill to go with them. The system had let me spend a card to reach across the realms and rob a hero I'd never even met, some future son of destiny called Mu Lin, of a fate treasure, sight unseen, before he ever knew it was his. And in the margins of the scripts I'd read, one other name kept surfacing at the edges: patient, waiting, Baidong, the immortal ancient sacred body, 9th ranked constitution in all the heavens, and the sworn, built-in natural enemy of the overlord body I'd just absorbed out of Yi Ming, which meant that somewhere out there, right now, growing up, was a hero the universe had specifically designed to be my opposite, my counterweight, the one made to end me. 2 heroes down in this one little world, and a whole upper realm of them still waiting apparently, everyone with my family's name already inked into the last chapter of his book. Good, I thought, and I was a little surprised to find I meant it. Come climb then, all of you. I'll be home. Meyer cut a rift in the side of the world with a blade that could cross between realms, and my flying boat turned its nose toward the light pouring through, toward the 3,000 Tao domains, toward the family I'd done every terrible thing on this whole trip to keep breathing, toward home. The immortal ancient Gu family hits you before you've even landed. The women felt it a full mile out. Spiritual energy 100 times thicker than anything the lower realm could dream of, so rich that Han Qingyu grabbed my sleeve because her own cultivation started trying to break through on its own, uninvited, right there on the deck. Above the whole compound turned an enormous divine wheel, the heavenly wheel, a treasure that stitches earth to sky, and means that not one blade of grass in my family's home can be harmed by anything short of a full emperor on a genuinely bad day. Long Wei, who conquered her own demon clan a week ago and burned a false god to ash, went quiet as a girl standing in a temple. Bai Lei pointed at things and asked what they were, and I told her, and not one of the answers made her feel smaller, which is the single nicest thing about coming home rich. Yunner is back! I want you to understand that my mother crossed the distance between the heavenly wheel and my flying boat faster than most emperors can move, and she spent all of that terrifying speed on a hug, and it still knocked the wind clean out of me. It's been less than 2 months, I wheezed, from somewhere inside the softness. 2 months. She held me out at arm's length to inspect me for damage. The same inspection she's been running since I was 3 years old. 2 months without my baby, and that wicked woman only gives you back 9 times a year. Don't you dare defend her. I can see it on your face. She hadn't even seen my master. She could sense the topic in the air like weather. Then she rounded on the rest of the boat, and my heart genuinely stopped because my mother meeting my life choices was a bigger threat to my survival than any son of destiny I'd faced all month. But first, chaos, because my family is constitutionally incapable of doing anything in the correct order. Ha! Little Phasey! My second uncle arrived like a landslide that had opinions. Your aura. You broke into the Dao Palace. That's my nephew. Drop the luggage. Come on, let's go break in that new overlord body of yours on the battlefield of 10,000 races. I know a lovely little war that's just getting started. We could be there by Gu Changa. My mother wheeled on the single most dangerous man in 3 realms and put a finger directly in his face. He just got home. He is not going to any battlefield. Look at him. He's exhausted. He never lifts a finger for himself, and you want to drag him to a war? And the butcher of the 3,000 Dao domains, the man who fights heaven itself for sport, who once held off 3 great emperors to a draw for fun, hung his head like a scolded schoolboy and mumbled, "Yes, sister-in-law," and I watched 3 of my new brides quietly recalibrate their entire understanding of power in real time. My father stood back from all of it, calm as still water. And when the noise finally died down, he looked at me, just looked, the way he does, with 3,000 years of not smiling that I've spent my whole life learning to read as pride. You did it, he said. I did it, Dad. A world spirit, whole, willing. Something moved briefly behind his eyes. No one has ever done that. Not your uncles, not me. I know. He didn't hug me. That's not him, and I've never needed it to be. He put one hand on my shoulder, the hand that has held off 10,000 men, and it weighed nothing at all. And then he took it back, and that was the entire conversation, and it was more than enough. Then my mother's gaze slid, with the terrible precision of a woman who has been waiting 2 decades for grandchildren, over to the 4 women standing frozen and awkward behind me. "Oh," she said, delighted and dangerous in equal measure. "Oh, our little Zhang Fei has been busy. Aren't you going to introduce me?" They shrank. Even Long Wei, who threatens to conquer me before breakfast, went the exact color of her own flame. I had to push them gently forward with a thread of spirit force because otherwise they'd have stood there rooted to the deck until the heat death of the realm. Han Qingyu, Bai Lei, Long Wei, I said. They're mine, from the lower realm. Be nice to them. There was a silence. My mother has a very specific silence, and it means she is deciding the fate of nations. Then she softened all at once, the way a weather front breaks, and produced 3 small jade bracelets out of nowhere. Come here, all of you. Look how nervous. There's nothing to be nervous about. My son has good taste. She slipped a bracelet onto each wrist with her own hands. These protect the heart. Consider it my apology for frightening you. And from this moment on, this part is important, so listen closely. My son's woman is my daughter. Every one of you. Now, say it. Call me mother. Mother, said Han Qingyu, generous and composed. Mother, said Bai Lei, shy, ducking her head. Mother, said Long Wei, twisting, and I swear on the heavenly wheel the Snake Queen nearly fainted from the sheer effort of it. My mother beamed like she'd conquered something, and then her eyes found the 4th one, the one hanging back apart from the others, and everything about the moment changed. And this, she said softer, must be Lin Ziyi. Lin Ziyi, daughter of an upper realm clan, betrothed once to someone else, and, the one thing none of the other 3 had, a girl who had never, not once in 18 years, had a mother. Her real one died the day she was born. She'd spent her whole life as a bargaining chip, an orphan, a goddess on a pedestal, a tool passed hand to hand. Nobody had ever simply been glad she was in the room. She stepped forward, stiff, braced for judgment, and shot me one look, a plea I couldn't answer because this part of it was never mine to fix. Mother, she managed, so quietly that even a quasi-emperor had to lean in to catch it. My mother caught it. My mother has excellent hearing precisely when it counts. She pulled Lin Ziyi into her arms, warm and absolute and unhesitating, exactly the way she'd hugged me my entire life, exactly the way this particular girl had been hugged precisely never, and I watched Lin Ziyi go rigid, and then stop being rigid, and then hold on. This fierce, proud, prickly girl, folding into a stranger's embrace like something that had finally, after 18 years of carrying it alone, been given permission to set the weight down. There now, my mother murmured into her hair. You're home. It's all right. You're home now. Lindsay cried, not the guilty crying from before, over the boy on the ground. The other kind. The kind you didn't know you'd been saving up. And I stood there, in the middle of my ridiculous, terrifying, impossible loving family, and I watched my mother a girl who had never once been mothered, and I felt the whole cold ledger of the last 2 months settle into my chest all at once. The framed boys, the drained clans, the drowned sea, the father I made a son watch me kill, I felt every ounce of it, and none of it got 1 gram lighter, and I understood, with perfect clarity, that it never would. This warm, loud, safe, impossible thing right in front of me, this is what all of it was for. I'm the villain of this story. I made my peace with that in a nursery 17 years ago with a mouthful of divine pacifier. But I want it on the record. Whoever keeps the record, I didn't do any of it for power, and I didn't do it for the system's little chimes, and I didn't do it because I'm cruel, though heaven knows I've been cruel. I did it so that this exact room with these exact people would still be standing tomorrow, so my mother could hug a lonely girl, so my father could not smile at me and mean it, so my idiot uncle could try to drag me off to a war and get scolded in front of company for it. Every hero in all the heavens can keep his tragic backstory and his righteous crusade and his 14 million shining tomorrows. I'll take this one. The single tomorrow where everybody I love gets to grow old and annoying and safe under the wheel, and I will burn down anything the universe sends to take it. My mother was still holding Lindsay when a strangled little sound came from the corner of the hall, and I remembered, belatedly, that we had a guest. Lin Fei. Lindsay's father, head of an upper realm clan, a great sage in his own right, a man who was somebody absolutely everywhere in creation except this specific room, where he'd been sitting for 3 days being quietly, thoroughly terrorized by my uncles. He'd come at my summons to discuss his daughter's future, and instead, he'd received a 3-day education in scale, a household where great sages run the errands, where quasi-emperors are the mid-level staff, where the second son once fought 3 great emperors to a standstill because it was a slow afternoon. He was staring at his daughter, the daughter he'd abandoned in the lower realm as an infant, the daughter it had taken him a full year of effort to coax into calling him father even once, melting into a stranger's arms and calling my mother inside of a minute. I watched that land on him. I did not feel bad about it. There are limits to my sympathy, and they stop a comfortable distance short of men who use their own children as poker chips. Patriarch Lin, my father said, and the temperature of the whole hall dropped 10 degrees. There's a matter to settle before any of us goes further. He tossed a file onto the table. Lindsay picked it up because she was nearest, and I watched her read her own name written next to a stranger's on a marriage contract she had never in her life heard of. What is this? Her voice had gone very flat, very quiet. Father, what is this? Z? Lin Fei started. You engaged me. She was shaking now, the paper crumpling in her fist. To a man I have never met, to pay off a debt. Everything since I came back to the family. Was I ever your daughter at all? Or was I always just a coin you hadn't gotten around to spending yet? The circumstances at the time were enough. And here is the thing that made me, personally, quietly, enormously happy. She didn't turn to her father for the explanation. She turned across the whole crowded hall and found me, and something in her face asked a question, and I crossed to her and pulled her in before the tears could fall the wrong way again. I don't care who they promised you to before I got here, I said, loud enough for the entire hall to hear it. That was then. This is now. You're mine. And your father is going to fix his mistake today, aren't you, Patriarch Lin? Lin Fei looked at his daughter's face, and then at my father's, and then at my second uncle's, who had drifted over and was cracking his knuckles with great interest. He went the specific gray of a man performing rapid, final cost-benefit analysis. Yes, he said to the floor. I'll dissolve the engagement with the Wang family, immediately, Your Highness. Ding. Marriage line between Zhou Lei and Lin Zi severed. Son of Destiny. Zhou Lei. Destiny value, -100. There it was again, that little chime. Because of course, the man they'd sold Lindsay to was a son of destiny, another hero, another book, another underdog with a hidden cheat and a growing grudge, waiting to be born. His name was Zhou Lei, and in his story, Lindsay grows up to become his empress. She stands at his side through the entire climb. She is the great love that anchors his whole legend. The universe really does love to hand me my next assignment gift-wrapped, with a bow on it. No time like the present, I said, and stood, and offered Lindsay my arm. Let's go break your engagement in person. I'd hate for the Wang family to feel neglected. We brought the whole show to the Emperor Clan Wang family, a fading imperial house one bad decade away from being a footnote, and we did it with style. Lin Fei out front to deliver the news, me behind him with his daughter on my arm, and a great sage of my clan trailing us as muscle, in case anyone in that house needed a live demonstration of the pecking order. Somebody did. Briefly. The Wang patriarch was mid-tantrum when we arrived, roaring at Lin Fei about honor and debts and how dare the Lin family insult an imperial house, throwing around the pressure of a genuine quasi-emperor like a man accustomed to being the scariest thing in any room he walked into. Then a great sage of my family flicked him across the hall with the back of one hand and knelt toward the doorway. "Welcome, your highness the emperor's son." And in walked the villain, arm in arm with the bride the hero was supposed to marry. I'll give the Wang family credit for exactly one thing. Their patriarch recognized me on sight and folded like wet paper, which was, genuinely, the smart move. It was his son who wouldn't. I disagree. The voice came from a side door, and there he was, the future divine concealment great emperor, the hero of this entire book, currently a 50-year-old man with the cultivation of a third-tier skin-refining novice, which for him was a very long and very cruel story I'll get to another time. Zhou Lei. Pale, gaunt, hands wrapped in bandages from cutting practice swings into a dead tree stump in the yard because he'd lost every scrap of his power years ago and had never once, on his worst night, stopped training. He looked at Lin Zi on my arm and his whole face broke open. And then he said it, hard. Deliberate, because that is what heroes do. Since ancient times, he said, forcing his ruined legs to carry him one trembling step at a time into the center of the hall. Marriage is arranged by parents and matchmakers. Lin Zi. My family raised your father up to his seat. Will you truly choose to be this faithless today, in front of everyone? It was a good speech. He believed every single word of it, and I felt, honestly, a flicker of something close to respect, because here was a man the universe had beaten all the way down to nothing, standing in front of a monster he couldn't hope to fight, still refusing to fall, which is precisely why he'll have to come off the board eventually. A hero you can respect is a hero who gets back up, but that's a job for another day. Today, I only needed the engagement dead, and the boy marked his mind to collect later once he'd fattened up. Lin Zi stepped forward on her own, out of my arm, onto her own 2 feet, and faced him, the man she'd been sold to, the future she'd been assigned without a vote. I was thrown away in the lower realm as an infant, she said, and her voice didn't shake at all now. I never received one single thing from either of these families except a bill, and now you want to bind me for the rest of my life with a contract I never signed to pay a debt I never owed? She lifted her chin. I already know exactly who I want to stand beside, and next to him, Zhou Lei. You are not worth a single speck of dust. The words went into him like thrown knives. I watched each one land. And I watched, with deep professional interest, the last thread of his fated romance snap clean in two. Zhou Lei took it standing, which cost him more than I can tell you. Then, because he was a hero and a hero cannot leave a wound alone, he reached into his robe and pulled out a crumpled marriage contract he'd clearly been carrying next to his heart for years. The thing he took out on his worst nights to remind himself he still had a future coming, and he tore it in half with his own shaking hands. Then I, Zhou Lei, divorce you, he announced, chin up, dredging one last scrap of dignity out of the bottom of himself. From this day, you and my family are nothing to each other. I release you. It was brave. It was proud. It was precisely the wrong thing to say in front of me. Lin Zi is my woman, I said, walking toward him, letting a little of what I actually am bleed out into the air of the hall. And you're standing here divorcing her? Every spine in the room went cold at once. I set one hand on his shoulder, gently, almost kindly, and I pushed, and a hero at the 3rd tier of skin refining went down to his knees against a pressure he had no way on earth to answer, cheek dragged toward the floor, unable to rise. Tell me, I said, quiet, just for him. Are you qualified? I want to be clear that I didn't hurt him. I didn't need to, and more than that, I didn't want to. Hurting him would have been a mercy. It would have handed him a wound to nurse, a clean grievance to grow strong on. So I just held him there, on his knees, in front of his own clan, and his own father, and the woman he'd loved his whole ruined life. And I let every person in that hall watch exactly how little he could do about any of it. Bruises heal. Humiliation is forever. Yanner! A woman came flying through the doors and threw herself flat to the floor in front of me before she'd even finished arriving, his mother Zhao Jing, forehead to the cold stone, begging, "My son is proud and foolish, your highness. The fault is all mine for raising him poorly. Punish me instead. Take my life instead. Only spare him. I'll do anything, anything you ask." Behind me, I felt the Wang patriarch nearly come apart at the seams, watching his own wife kneel and offer herself to another man. And I looked down at this woman, willing to trade her life on the spot for a boy who couldn't stand, and I filed her away too, because I'd read the book and I knew exactly what she was. Another one of Zhou Lei's soft spots. Another anchor. Another lever, for the day I come back to finish this properly. Anything, I repeated, mild. Anything, she swore. forehead still to the floor. I let it hang there just long enough for every soul in that hall to understand the true shape of the power standing in the middle of it. Then I lifted my hand off her son because I already had what I'd come for. The engagement was dead. Lindsay was mine, fully, publicly, with no threads left dangling for fate to pick back up. And Zhou Lei, the future divine concealment great emperor, 4,900 points of untouched destiny sitting inside him like gold bricks in a vault, was now a boy on his knees in front of me, with a grudge the size of a mountain range and not one shred of power to act on it. The fattest fish I'd ever hooked, and I was throwing him back, alive, to grow, because you don't gut a fish that isn't finished fattening. Get up, I told him, not unkindly, and turned to go. Train hard, eat well, grow strong. I looked back at him once from the doorway, and I let him see, just for a second, just for him, exactly what was underneath the handsome face and the golden aura. I'll want you at your very best when I come back. It's no fun otherwise. His eyes followed me out, bloodshot with rage and helplessness both. Good. Let him remember it. Let him spend the next years getting strong on the fuel of that exact moment, climbing and climbing toward the day he's certain he'll finally make me pay for it. He'll get all the way to the top, that boy. I've read how his story goes when I'm not standing in it, from crippled nobody to a god who cracks the heavens open, but I'm standing in it now, and the higher he climbs, the further he'll have to fall. Back home, I handed the Purgatory Demon Blade to my second uncle because an immortal artifact that kills anything below Emperor rank was never going to suit my father's temperament, and it fit my uncle like a glove fits a fist. Xiao Feizi. He held the thing up, and the bloodlust rolling off it made grown great sages back quietly out of the courtyard, and his eyes were shining like a child's on his birthday. Where did you? No, don't tell me. If you tell me, I'll have to have an opinion about it, and I'd much rather just enjoy it. He grinned, wide and delighted. I'm going to name it. I'm going to give it a name and everything. I stood off to the side and let him fall in love with his terrifying new toy, and I let the leftover immortal energy wash over me, and somewhere in the middle of my uncle cooing at a murder sword, I quietly stepped across the threshold into the Dao Palace realm. First tier, just like that. No secluded mountain, no careful ritual, no years of pain. I broke through leaning against a pillar, watching my uncle propose to a knife. That's the whole difference between me and the heroes in the end. They bleed for every inch, they lose everything, hit the absolute bottom, and claw their way back up through 14 million tomorrows of suffering to earn their power one agonizing step at a time. Me? Everything they earn, I take. Everything they suffer for, I absorb. They're forged in fire, and I'm forged in the furnace of heaven and earth, and everyone else's fire just feeds the intake. I thought about the road ahead, and I won't pretend to you that it's a short one. 2 heroes down, and I could already feel the weight of the ones still coming. Zhou Lei, on his knees now, climbing later. Bai Dong somewhere out there, the 9th-ranked constitution in all the heavens, the natural enemy the universe built from the ground up specifically to end me. Mu Lin, a name and nothing else yet, already robbed of a fate he doesn't even know he's lost. The whole upper realm is thick with them, every last one a book, every book ending with my family's ashes. Let them come. I'll be home. I'll have read every page before they live it, and I'll be waiting at every opportunity they're promised, in every treasure vault fate sets aside with their name on the tag, with a smile and a furnace and all the time in the world. And I didn't have to wait long for the first of them to come knocking, but before he did, the whole world found out who I was. The business at the Wang family spread across the 3,000 Dao domains like a grease fire. It turns out gossip moves the same speed in a cultivation empire as it did back on Earth, which is to say, faster than light and twice as inaccurate. By the end of the week, every academy and every tea house in creation was buzzing about the Gu prince who'd walked into an imperial clan, taken the man's bride, humiliated the heir, and strolled out again without raising his voice. The royal family's fallen so far they got publicly jilted, went the whisper. A disgrace. And then, quieter, worse. I heard the patriarch offered up his own wife to get on the prince's good side, and the Wang family came out ahead for it. That last part wasn't quite what happened. But it wasn't far off either, and I'm not going to pretend it was cleaner than it was, because I did take Zhou Lei's mother, not the way the rumor meant it. I want to be clear about that, because even I have a floor, and that's under it. What I took was her loyalty. The system store, it turned out, sold a thing called a master-servant contract, a cold little binding that flips a cultivator's allegiance to you completely and permanently. No romance to it, no seduction, just a lock clicking over in someone's soul. 500 villain points. And I had just harvested exactly 500 off Zhou Lei's own rage, so really, he paid for it himself. I used it on Zhao Jing, and here's the arithmetic, laid out flat, because I promised I'd keep telling you the cold parts. Zhou Lei had exactly 2 anchors left in the world, his pride, which I'd already broken on the floor of his own hall, and his mother, the one person who'd never stopped believing in him, who'd have walked into fire for him, who was his last soft place to land. So I turned her into the thing that threw him in a cell. Bound to me, Zhao Jing walked back into the Wang family and took it over as my proxy, deposed her own husband, seized the clan, and when her son came crawling to her, bloodied and desperate, calling her mother, begging her to explain, she looked at him like he was something scraped off a boot and had the guards drag him down to the deepest dungeon they had. "You're no son of mine," she told him, cold as a closing door. "You were always a disappointment. Rot down there and think about it." I've done a lot of things on this trip that sit heavy. That one I did from another room, without even watching, while I reviewed my loot. And I think that's the one that should scare you most about me. Not the framing, not the killing, not the drowned sea. The fact that I broke a good woman into a weapon and pointed her at her own child, and I did it as an afterthought, between chores. I keep telling you I look back. I do. But looking back has never once made me stop. Down in the dungeon, though, and this is the part the universe never accounts for, Zhou Lei did not break. His old friends came down to gloat, the little lackeys who'd bowed to him his whole life, now free to kick a fallen prince. They mocked him, they shoved him around, and somewhere in the middle of it, at the absolute bottom, with nothing left and no one coming, the thing inside Zhou Lei that the universe had been saving finally woke up. His body wasn't broken, it was a bank. That was his secret, the divine concealment body, a physique that doesn't lose power, it hides it, banks it, hoards it in the dark, and pays it all back at once with interest. Years ago, when his cultivation collapsed, it hadn't collapsed at all. Somebody had stolen his luck out from under him, and his body had simply gone into hiding, waiting, saving, biding its time. Somebody. Right. That was me too, back before I'd ever met him, when my father skimmed the fortunes off 30 lucky men in the upper realm and poured them into baby me. Zhou Lei had been one of the 30. His whole ruined life traced back to a decision my family made about my nursery. The universe has a sense of humor. It's just not a kind one. In that cell, Zhou Lei's banked power came roaring back and a little voice piped up in his skull, sharp, mocking, and about 6 inches tall. "You've broken through to the first tier of the Dao Palace and you're already smug? Compared to your enemies, host, you're still trash. Meet Jin Shi, the spirit of the heaven-severing divine sword, a broken top-grade immortal artifact and Zhou Lei's real cheat code, currently manifesting as a tiny armored girl with a big attitude and 0 patience for her own wielder." Who are you?" Zhou Lei managed. "Ugh. If the sword didn't only bond with the divine concealment body, believe me, I'd have picked literally anyone else." She crossed her little arms. 55 years old and you're just now waking up. Do you have any idea how boring solitary confinement is? Call me Nana and I'll tell you why your talent vanished." "I'm not calling you Nana." "Then enjoy being trash for another 100 years. "Nana." "There we go." She smirked. "Your luck got stolen, boy, by the same person who took your bride and your mother. You want your power back? You reclaim your own destiny, from him." Zhou Lei already knew the name, of course he did. Every road in his ruined life ran to the same door. Zhang Fei. He came out of that cell like a storm, tore through the lackeys who'd mocked him, and went looking for his father, and instead found the truth about his mother, cold and final, and it broke something in him that the beatings never touched. I let him live. I want that on the record too, because it wasn't mercy. He had thousands of points of untouched destiny still ripening inside him, and a fish that fat doesn't get gutted early, so I left him down there with his tiny, furious sword spirit and his mountain of hate, growing stronger by the day, on a diet of pure spite, aimed directly at me, building myself the perfect enemy, one humiliation at a time. It's fine. I've read his book. I know exactly how strong he gets. I just intend to be standing on every rung before he reaches it. There was a third hero. There's always a third hero. The upper realm grows them like weeds. His name was Mu Lin, and the system had let me buy his whole life story out of the store for a bargain. A 2,000-point script generator, name in, novel out. His book was called Star Emperor, and he was a different animal from the last two. Patient, disciplined, a body refiner who'd spent 60 grinding years turning himself from a crippled prince who couldn't cultivate into a quiet powerhouse, all while playing the fool so nobody saw him coming. I respected it, honestly. It also made him easy. A hero who plays weak to hide his strength thinks he's invisible. But I'd read the book, and I had a listening charm stuck to him, so from where I sat, he wasn't hiding at all. He was standing in the middle of the room with the lights on, congratulating himself on the dark. His big moment was a treasure vault called the Niang Trove, out in a poor backwater domain, the sealed legacy of some dead saint. 10 keys, 1 grand prize, and a destined haul that was supposed to launch Mulin toward godhood. So I got there first. You know the drill by now. I didn't even have to threaten anyone, which was refreshing. I walked in, let a little pressure off the leash, and the local powers fell over each other to hand me their keys. One of them, a scheming little dynasty king named Lin Chi, took to the role of my lackey so enthusiastically that I started to worry about him. But the real prize wasn't a key. The real prize was the dog. In Mulin's book, there's a demon wolf, a sad, sycophantic, bottom-of-the-barrel creature called Huo Ming, who spends the early chapters groveling to everyone and getting kicked around by his own kind, and then, much later, awakens a legendary bloodline and becomes the hero's most loyal war brother, a genuine demon emperor at his side. I met him in his groveling phase. He tried to lick my boot and volunteer as my mount in the same breath. Sir, you look like a man in need of a handsome, dashing, majestic steed. I have a trace of the Silver Moon Demon Wolf bloodline, one of the 10 great imperial beast races. I would never let you lose face. The other demons were mortified. His own kind kicked him across the clearing, sneering about dignity and the demon race's proud backbone. I looked at this shameless, desperate, tail-wagging creature, and I remembered that in the book, he becomes a demon emperor. Come here, I said, and tossed him a blood enhancement orb. A nasty little treasure that skips a monster straight to its awakened bloodline, no adventures required. Ho Ming swallowed it out of the air like a dog catching a treat, and then, in front of the entire jeering assembly, the bottom-of-the-barrel groveling wolf, who couldn't get any respect, began to change. His fur going pure, blinding silver, his frame swelling into something vast and moonlit and terrible, an overwhelming imperial demon aura crashing out across the valley. The Silver Moon, Demon Wolf. A demon emperor's bloodline, awakened in one gulp, right there, before the eyes of every creature who'd just been mocking him. The clearing went dead silent. The exact demons who'd kicked him a minute ago started, urgently, revising their opinions. Demon Wolf, old friend. Remember when we stole bird eggs together? Demon Wolf, we were just joking. Huo Ming looked down at the pile of new power that had just landed on him, looked up at me, and dropped his enormous silver head to the ground. Thank you, master. Huo Ming serves you for life and will never betray you. The oath sealed itself under heaven's own law. And just like that, the hero's future best friend and greatest war brother was mine, devoted, unbreakable, and when I pointed him at the demons who'd spent his whole life mocking him, absolutely delighted to prove his worth. Ding, you have recruited Mulin's future companion, Huo Ming. Mulin has lost his greatest late-game ally, destiny value, -800. Across the valley, Mulin pressed a hand to his chest, feeling something he couldn't name slip out of his future and away. He glared at me with a hate he didn't understand, the specific bewildered fury of a man watching someone casually reach into his life and take a piece he hadn't even known was promised to him. By what right, his eyes said, do you get to hand out fortunes and take them away with a wave, which was rich, coming from a prince who only survived infancy because his father ran a kingdom. But heroes never do the math on their own luck. They only ever count what's taken. I made him kneel, in the end. Made the disciplined, patient, proud body refiner get down on both knees in the dirt in front of his father and his brothers, and hand me his key with his head bowed. It wasn't in his script. His script had him keeping his dignity, and the system pinged happily as I carved a fresh humiliation into a place the book had left clean. Then I rode my brand new demon emperor into the vault, cleared it of everything worth having, and left the scraps for the heroes to fight over on the way out. Mulin dragged himself up the trial road behind me on will alone and got his legs broken for the effort, his destiny bleeding out with every step, another chosen one knocked off his pedestal without my ever once bothering to draw a weapon. 3 heroes down now, more or less. And I'll be honest, around here, it started to feel less like a war and more like a routine. Show up early, take the prize, turn their best friend into my mount, their mentor into my servant, their love into my wife. Collect the villain points. Move to the next book. I was very good at it. I was arguably the best there had ever been. And that, it turns out, is exactly the kind of thing the universe waits for you to think, right before it introduces you to the one person you can't read. Her name was Suling Yu. And I'm going to save her for the end, where she belongs, because she's the only part of this whole story that still makes the back of my neck go cold. So let me finish the easy wins first. Mulin, the 3rd hero, I bled dry over the following weeks the way you drain a battery. His mentor was a quasi-emperor ant named Manhwa, who'd left him a small fortune in traps and treasures and a time-warping bracelet worth more than most kingdoms. I took the bracelet, thanked her, and moved on. His mentor's parting gift, a puppet strong enough to guard him, got shredded in a collapsing vault. And his family, his father, and both his brothers, the men who'd loved the crippled prince when no one else would, got torn apart by the very lackey I'd installed to do exactly that. A scheming little dynasty king named Lin Chi, who'd been playing dog for me the whole time and was thrilled to finally take the leash off. Mu Lin crawled out of that valley alive, barely demonic energy rotting through his veins, his family in the dirt, his fortune in my pocket. Another disciplined, patient, iron-willed hero, reduced to a wreck who never once landed a blow on me. I took his bracelet home and did something with it that I want you to hear, because it's where the story starts to turn. I stacked it inside my tower, the bracelet bent time, the tower bent time, put one inside the other, and I got a room where 300 days passed while 3 went by outside. I sat in that folded hour and I climbed into the 3rd tier of the Dao Palace faster than anyone in my family's long history, and as I climbed, the visions my power threw off started to change. A cultivator at my tier manifests a phenomenon, a sign in the heavens, a reflection of what's inside them. My father's is a green world holding back 10,000 men. My uncle's is an overlord treading the sky. Mine came up as a sea of 10,000 screaming demons devouring a heart. And then, the next tier, a heavenly demon descending on a burning world. Meyer saw it and went quiet in a way she never does. "Young master," she said carefully, "these signs, they're beautiful, and they're terrifying. You look, when they rise, like the thing the righteous path builds armies to put down. Not the gentle prince the world thinks you are." She hesitated. "Maybe don't show anyone." I laughed it off. I told her we'd figure it out, but I filed it next to the other things I file, because I'd read a dark hint in a book by then that I hadn't told anyone about, and my own soul was apparently starting to draw a picture of exactly the man that book said I become. More on that when I get to her. The lighter note first, because I promised you the easy part, and because I owe this next fellow a fond farewell. Remember Huo Ming? My demon emperor wolf, the sycophant I'd bootstrapped into a legendary bloodline? Well, that bloodline sent up a flare, and one afternoon an actual quasi-emperor of the Silver Moon Demon Wolf clan came stepping out of the sky onto my deck to collect his long-lost imperial-blooded descendant. This was, by the way, a genuine quasi-emperor, the kind of being that makes whole regions tremble. He was polite to me, everyone's polite to me now, and he explained, reasonably, that Huo Ming belonged with his own kind, being raised to greatness, and surely the Gu family wouldn't object. I didn't object. Huo Ming was a lovely mount, but I wasn't going to fight a demon clan over a dog when they were offering to raise him into an emperor for free. "Go home, Huo Ming," I told him. "Cultivate hard, make me proud." Huo Ming looked at the quasi-emperor, looked at me, and then this enormous, silver, imperial-blooded demon wolf threw himself flat on my deck, wrapped both forelegs around my leg, and began to wail. "Master, no! Huo Ming doesn't want to go! How will Huo Ming live without you? Don't send me away! Don't! The quasi-emperor of the Silver Moon Demon Wolf clan, an ancient, dignified, world-shaking being, stood there watching his own bloodline's heir sob and cling to a human's trouser leg, and I watched something die behind his eyes. You could see him questioning every choice that had led to this moment. "Why," he said faintly, to no one, "does the bootlicker get the emperor's blood, while I spent 500 years stuck at the 2nd tier? I had to physically pry the wolf off my leg. In the end, the quasi-emperor grabbed Huo Ming by the scruff, tore a hole in space, and fled through it like a man escaping a fire, his howling heir tucked under one arm, the single most undignified exit in the history of the demon race. "Farewell, you shameless animal," I called after him, genuinely a little moved. "You were the best mount I ever had." Meyer wiped her eyes, laughing. "The whole demon world is going to be talking about that for 1,000 years. "Good," I said. "Let them. Everyone should get to be famous for something." And that was the easy part, the routine. The petty little joys of a villain who'd stopped losing so long ago he'd forgotten what it felt like. Because there were 2 things left waiting for me at home. One of them was the woman I'd been dodging since the first line of this whole story, and the other was the one who'd read the last page. So, my master. I'd been putting it off, if I'm honest. I'd flattened demon kings and drowned a god and knelt emperors in the dirt, and I had spent a small but genuine amount of that time inventing reasons not to go home and explain the 5 women to the most powerful person in 3,000 realms. Eventually, you run out of reasons. I flew my boat down into the Supreme Divine Dynasty, landed in the Empress's palace where I'd been landing since I was 3, and called out, trying to sound casual, failing, "Master, I'm back." She was across the palace before the words finished, and she hit me with a hug that rearranged 2 of my ribs. "Chimph." She held me at arm's length, exactly the way my mother does, which tells you everything about how these 2 women have shaped my entire life. "I thought you weren't coming back at all. Off to the Gu family the second you landed. And then, a little bird tells me, off to the Wang family with a pretty girl on your arm to break off somebody's engagement." She grabbed my ear and hauled me inside like a truant. "You've been busy, little wolf." Master, ow, master, do you know how strong you are? One day you're going to actually break your own disciple. Here's the thing I've never told anyone, and I'll tell you now, because we're near the end, and you've earned it. My master loves me, really loves me. She's the terrifying empress of the largest dynasty in the lower half of the heavens. She carved her throne out of her own brothers without blinking, and somewhere along the way of raising a strange little transmigrator boy from the age of 3, she decided he was hers, and she has never once wavered. It's a secret. It has to be, because my mother would burn down a continent before she let her own sworn sister become her daughter-in-law, and the phrase sister-in-law becomes daughter-in-law is not one anyone in my family is emotionally prepared to say out loud, so we keep it quiet. She even handed me Meyer herself, clear-eyed about what she was doing, because she'd rather share me on her own terms than lose 1 inch of me to chance. That is, for the record, an insane way to love a person. It is also the only reason I'm alive, sane, and standing here telling you this, so I've made my peace with it. She sat me down on her dragon throne, in her lap like I was still small, and the jealousy melted out of her the way it always does the second I stop trying to leave. You brought women home, she said, not a question. I brought women home. From the lower realm, little natives with no rank. She sniffed. They'll have to call me Master Empress and mean it. They will. And Ling Yu. Her voice softened and got sharper at the same time, which only she can do. The Chin girl, your father tells me she suddenly won't marry you. That she came to hate you overnight, for no reason anyone can name. Those ancient eyes searched my face. That's not nothing, Fire. A girl doesn't turn on a boy she's loved since childhood without a reason. Something happened to her that hasn't happened yet. I didn't answer. She's too sharp by half, my master. She'd put her finger on the exact shape of the thing I was still refusing to look at directly, and she'd done it in one sentence, with a girl she'd never met. Never mind, she said, letting me off, because she always lets me off eventually. You'll handle it. You handle everything. She flicked my forehead, hard, the way she has since I was a child. But you're spending your nights here from now on, do you understand me? I've waited a year, and in the meantime, a wicked little smile. You're going to school. I'm sorry, I'm going to what? Manhwa Academy, finest young minds in the dynasty. She was enjoying this far too much. There's an old dean there sitting on a treasure I've wanted for a century, a great Tao heavenly book she'll only give to the champion of her tournament. So, my brilliant disciple is going to enroll, win her silly contest, and bring his master her book. She patted my cheek. Consider it homework. I looked at the woman who could unmake the sky, who had waited a year for me, who had just correctly diagnosed a threat she couldn't see, and then, in the same breath, assigned me to go win a school science fair. And I understood, with total clarity, the shape of my life. I opened this whole story flat on my back on this exact throne, 20 years old, calling out to a brand new system to save me from this exact woman. I have, since then, conquered a world, killed the hero's fate built to kill me, come home a Tao Palace prince with a fused world in my chest and an empire that kneels, and I am still, right now, a boy in his master's lap, being sent to school and losing the argument about it. Yes, master, I said, because some things you don't out-scheme. You just love them, and let them win, and count yourself lucky they picked you. I meant to make our secret public one day. I told her so, right there, clumsy and certain. When I'm strong enough, the whole world's going to know. She laughed and told me to work harder. My cultivation wasn't quite there yet. It was the last easy moment I got, because the other woman, the one who'd read my ending, was about to make sure of it. So I went to school. I want you to sit with how absurd that is. The terror of the lower realm, the man who drowned a god, enrolling at a magic academy because his girlfriend told him to bring home a library book. Manhwa Academy was the finest school in the dynasty, and my flying boat, 9 divine dragons pulling a hull the size of a palace, did not exactly help me blend in. Every student in the place stopped to stare. Every female student, per my usual curse, stopped to sigh. And waiting at the gate to greet me was the dean herself, which is where the trip got interesting, because the mirror flipped open a page and told me the sweet, quiet, book-loving old dean was a genuine great emperor named Chu Yueqi, and the female lead of yet another hero's novel besides. The heroes just would not stop. They were everywhere. This whole world was a nursery for them, and I'd wandered into a particularly crowded crib. I found the newest one within the hour, and he found me, and he hated me on sight, which was convenient because I was going to need him to. His name was Zhao Jian, Shadow God Body, 35th ranked Constitution, a menial servant disciple for 30 years until he stumbled into the inheritance of a dead emperor called Ming Gui and started quietly to rise. He had a purple destiny, the strongest I'd met, and a real trump card tucked up his sleeve, and the universe does love its symmetry. He was another natural-born enemy of mine, because the emperor whose power he'd inherited had died fleeing my grandfather after trying to rob our family. The The grudge was 3 generations old before Zhao Jian ever drew breath, and he had exactly one soft spot. Her name was Zhao Shuyan, the dean's beautiful disciple, the woman who'd found him in the dirt and lifted him up, the white moonlight he'd worshipped in silence for 30 years and never once found the courage to touch. So when the dean assigned Zhao Shuyan to show the handsome new prince around the campus, and Zhao Shuyan, 30% on sight, double for a woman, nervously, helplessly, took my hand to lead me through the crowd, I did not have to lift a single finger to destroy Zhao Jian. I just let her hold my hand. And I was polite about it. That's it. That's the whole attack. I walked the length of that academy with the hero's decades-long, unspoken, sacred love holding my hand in front of the entire student body, and I was a perfect gentleman the whole time, poured her rare tea, praised her cleverly, escorted her to her door and said a warm goodnight and nothing more, while Zhao Jian crouched behind a wall in the dark, unable to hear a thing, unable to storm in, unable to do anything but marinate in his own imagination for an entire night, certain the worst was happening 6 feet away and utterly powerless to stop it. The system chimed happily the whole time. He fed me 1,000 villain points before midnight, rage, jealousy, humiliation, despair, all of it from a man watching a hand he'd never dared to hold get held, gently, by someone who didn't even want it. I've killed heroes. I've drained clans and drowned seas. And I want to be honest, nothing on this whole trip made the system happier than the night I destroyed a good man by being courteous to the woman he loved. It's the pettiest thing I've ever done. It might be the cruelest. There's no blood in it at all, and it'll outlast every wound I ever dealt. Zhao Jian went back to his room that night and swore, to the dark, that one day he'd be strong enough to make me pay. They all swear it. I've got a collection. But here's what none of them understood. Not Zhao Jian, not Zhou Lei, not Mu Lin, not any of the tide of heroes rising across the 3,000 realms with my family's name inked into their final chapters. They thought they were the story. Every one of them, certain the universe had built the whole world as a stage for his particular rise. And somewhere out in a place called the Yaoguang Holy Land, the one who actually mattered was finishing his own ascent, and I felt it happen like a cold front moving in. Bai Dong, the immortal ancient sacred body, 9th-ranked constitution in all the heavens, so famous that when people say sacred body with no other word attached, they mean his. 9 signs lit the sky when his body completed, and his physique is the sworn, built-in, natural enemy of the overlord body I'd pulled out of Yi Ming, the two of them opposites at the root of creation, one made to end the other. He shivered that day, mid-cultivation, feeling something wrong in the world without knowing what. That something was me, reading his name in a book, learning every opportunity fate had set aside for him, and smiling. Come find me, Bai Dong. When you're ready, I'll be at every door you're promised, holding it shut. I had them all mapped, every hero, every prize, every future. I was so far ahead of the entire board that it had genuinely stopped being a game and started being a chore. Which is exactly the moment the universe finally played the one card I hadn't read. Her name was Su Ling Yu, and I'll get to her. She's the end of everything, the last page, the one that matters. But the universe didn't play her all at once. It let me keep winning for a while first, right up until the moment it stopped. So let me show you the last of the winning, because some of it was genuinely funny, and you've earned a laugh before the cold part. Start with the homework. My master had sent me to school to win a tournament and bring her a book, and my first day involved a placement test, the demon-suppressing tower, 100 floors of escalating monsters that freshmen climb to prove their worth. The record for a new student, 30 floors, had stood untouched for tens of thousands of years. It belonged to my master, and Zhao Jian, my new pet hero, saw a chance to bury me. He got out in front of the crowd and started loudly, obnoxiously insisting that His Highness would surely clear all 100 floors, setting the bar impossibly high so that when I inevitably fell short, I'd look like an arrogant fraud. He played the fanatical follower to the hilt, whipping the students into expecting a miracle, grinning to himself the whole time. The higher they lift you, he figured, the harder you fall. It was, honestly, a decent plan. It had exactly one flaw. I actually could clear all 100 floors. I walked into that tower and walked up it like a man climbing his own stairs. 20 floors before anyone finished their tea. 30, my master's record, erased. 50, 70, where the dragon beasts live, and no freshman in history had ever stood. A dragon the size of a house lunged at me on the 90th floor, bit down on my fused armor, and shattered its own teeth. I patted it on the head, told it I was sorry, and moved on. 100 floors, one day, both records on the ancient stone rewritten with my name. My masters erased clean off the monument I'd been sent to conquer. And poor Zhao Jian, who'd spent the whole day loudly betting the crowd I'd reach the top, got exactly what he asked for, and had to stand there smiling through it while the students clapped him on the back. Man, you called it. You said 100 floors. You really are His Highness's most devoted dog. Thank you, Zhao Jian said. through a face the color of a bruise, feeding me another few hundred villain points with every syllable. The best schemes I've found are the ones where your enemy builds the trap himself and then walks you to it. I didn't lay a finger on Zhao Jian that whole day. He humiliated himself trying to humiliate me, and I just showed up and climbed some stairs. His mentor, the lovely Zhao Xiuyan, the white moonlight he'd worshipped in silence for 30 years, watched me rewrite the heavens off the top of that tower and made her decision. She was an adult and a clever one, and she chose, clear-eyed, to reach for the prince instead of pining forever for a cousin who'd never once found the courage to speak. She invited me to her courtyard. I went. And a hero's 30-year dream folded quietly into my column, not through any drug or trick, just a woman deciding she'd rather have the sunrise than keep watching it from a window. Zhao Jian paced outside all night in the dark, imagining the worst, and in the morning when his senior sister kissed me goodbye in front of him, something in him finally, cleanly broke. Another 1,000 points. Another future rerouted. Another hero left standing in a doorway, watching the thing he loved walk off on someone else's arm. I told you the tide never stopped. Let me show you just how high it had gotten, because this is the part that actually made me laugh out loud. That same academy had a second hero in it, at the same time, in the same crowd. His name was Wei Yang, and he was, I say this with real affection, a complete and total clown. Another transmigrator like me dropped into this world with a cheat and a grudge, except where I'd spent 17 years quietly understanding exactly what I was. Wei Yang had spent his convinced, bone-deep, unshakably, that he was the one true protagonist of all creation. He wore rags and played a lowly bodyguard, hiding his real power on his master's orders, absolutely certain that any day now he'd reveal his true self and every woman in the world would swoon and every man would kneel. He had a destiny script 50 women long, he had a celestial dragon body, he had backing him a crippled old great emperor, who naturally my own grandfather had crippled, because at this point the whole 3,000 realms is just a list of people my family has wronged. And this magnificent idiot looked at me, the man who'd just rewritten the heavens off the top of a tower, the terror of the lower realm, the villain fate itself built to fight, and he sneered. Just a spoiled native, Wei Yang muttered, watching me walk off with a goddess on my arm. Relies on family money and a pretty face. I've seen his type. Useless. When I finally reveal my true strength, he'll be a stepping stone like all the rest. I want to be clear, he was standing 40 feet from me. I could hear every word. He'd been designated by the universe as a son of destiny, one of the chosen, and he had wandered into the exact same room as the designated villain and failed to notice the temperature drop at all because his own protagonist delusion was too loud to hear anything over. I didn't even bother with him that day. I just filed the name, marked him as another fish for another afternoon, and moved on. When the world hands you heroes this convinced of their own script, you don't rush. They keep. They ripen, and they never, ever see you coming, because in their story you're not the villain, you're an extra, a background native, a stepping stone with a nice jaw. That's what the whole board looked like. By the end of the winning, heroes stacked to the ceiling, a pet one humiliating himself in a tower, a delusional one insulting me to my face without knowing my name, a crippled prince banking hatred in a dungeon, a patient one rotting with demonic energy in a valley. A natural-born enemy finishing his ascent out in the Holy Land, every one of them certain, absolutely certain, that the universe had built the whole world as the stage for his particular glorious rise. Not one of them looked up long enough to notice the man who'd read all their books, standing at the top of the tower, holding all their endings, bored. Take Wei Yang, since I brought him up. My delusional isekai clown deserves his full moment. A day after the tower, he wandered into the Academy's technique library, got told he needed a token like everyone else, and, being the protagonist of all creation, refused on principle to follow a rule that applied to lesser beings. There was a scuffle. My man Shu Fan, a merchant heir who's been my cheerful henchman for years and would play a fool for me all day long, happened to be there to get kicked. Happened to point out that Wei Yang was an unregistered nobody, and the old librarian pinned our true dragon face first to the floor in front of the two women he decided were destined to be his. They watched their bodyguard get flattened, called him a beast, and walked off on my arm instead. And Wei Yang, cheek pressed to the stone, unable to move, being dragged to detention, thought, and I quote, because I was close enough to hear every word of it, I'm being patient. When I finally reveal my true power, they'll all regret this. He genuinely believed it. He believed it the way you believe the sun comes up. He was a chosen one, wandering the exact same building as the designated villain of the whole world, insulting me to my face, losing his women to me in real time, and it never once occurred to him that he wasn't the main character. I didn't even have to scheme against Wei Yang. I just had to stand near him and let his own delusion do the work. Some heroes you dismantle. That one dismantled himself and thanked the universe for the growth. And here's the thing that started to genuinely get to me around then. There was no bottom to the supply. Shu Fan mentioned, in passing, that his family had recently gotten a long-lost older brother back, a cold, resentful young man named Shu Yi, shipped off to cultivate at a place called the Yaoguang Holy Land, which is where Bai Dong, my natural-born enemy, was also finishing his ascent. Which meant that one holy land was, at that very moment, incubating at least 2 future world-shaking heroes at once, like a farm, like a hatchery. The universe wasn't handing me one destined foe at a time anymore. It was mass-producing them, in bulk, on an industrial schedule, every single one guaranteed to grow up and reach for my family's throat, and I was the only person in all of creation who could see the whole assembly line running. You want to know when I stopped feeling like a clever villain and started feeling like a man bailing out the ocean with a spoon? Right about there. But I want to tell you one good thing before the dark part, because it's my favorite thing in this whole story, and I've been saving it. My master. The terrifying Empress. The woman I opened this story running from. Years ago, when I was younger and dumber, I went hunting, cleared an area for myself, and killed a bear demon in it, who turned out to be the young chief of a whole demon clan of savage bears, 3 quasi-emperors deep, with an emperor-tier ancestral spirit and everything. They came for me, surrounded me, demanded my life for their prince. My master heard about it, and she came, alone. And she looked at 3 quasi-emperors and their summoned emperor ancestor and their imperial treasures, and she said, I have this word for word, it's carved into me. Who allowed your son into my fire's hunting grounds? He cleared the area, your prince stayed, that makes him pray. What has my fire done wrong? And then there was no more savage bear demon clan, anywhere. 3 quasi-emperors, gone. The ancestral altar, shattered. The emperor spirit they summoned to save themselves, annihilated in a single blow. Not one survivor. The whole clan, erased from the world, over a hunting ground dispute because someone had inconvenienced the boy she'd raised. That's my master. That is the specific, unhinged, absolute way she loves me. The whole upper realm went quiet about her for years afterward, and then quietly agreed to never, ever make her use that voice again. I run from her, in this story. I make jokes about being scared to go home and explain the harem, and all of that is true. But I want it on the record right here before I show you the coldest things I did. There are 2 women in this world who would unmake the heavens for me without a flicker of hesitation. One is my mother. The other is the Empress who once ended a demon clan because they made me late for dinner. I have never, not for 1 second, doubted that I am loved, which is what makes the next part so hard to explain, because a man that loved should not be capable of what I did to Zhou Lei's family. And I was, and I did it anyway. Remember Zhou Lei? The crippled prince I'd left rotting in his own family's dungeon, his mother turned against him, his power slowly clawing back on a diet of pure hate? I wasn't done with him. I'm never done early. And what I did next is, I think, the single cruelest thing on my whole ledger, and I did it from another realm entirely, by leaving one instruction with a woman I'd hollowed out. Zhou Lei wanted out of that cell, badly, and his tiny sword spirit, Jin Shi, who has the morals of a kitchen knife, kept whispering the way out. Apologize, grovel, acknowledge the man. Who took everything as your new father. Swear it. It's just words, she told him. Words are cheap and freedom is dear. So Zhou Lei, at the bottom of himself, did it. He knelt in front of his mother, the mother I'd bound to me, and he wept, and he swore, with a real cultivator's oath, on his own life, that he acknowledged me as his father, that his mother had chosen correctly, that if he'd been in her place, he'd have chosen me too over his own dad. He said it with tears running down his face and hate running under them, telling himself it was a strategy, that survival justified anything, that he'd endure this and one day make me pay. And when he finished, when the oath was sealed and the tears were still wet, my proxy had the screen behind her slid aside. His father was sitting there, listening to all of it. Zhou Dong. Once the proud patriarch of an imperial clan, now a crippled old man with his cultivation gone and his limbs half ruined, who had loved his son through every failure, and who had just heard that son swear, on his life, to call the man who destroyed them all father, and mean it enough to disown his own dad in the same breath. I've told you I do terrible things for good reasons. This one I did to snap the last thing holding a broken man together, because a father who loves you is a lever, and I never leave a lever unpulled. The old man looked at his son for a long moment while the light went out of him. And then, with the last scrap of power a ruined cultivator has, the power to stop his own heart, he took his own life in front of the boy, rather than live one more second in the world he just heard described. Zhou Lei screamed, called his mother a monster. Got told, coldly, that it was all his own fault for reaching above his station in the first place, and then got stripped of his name and thrown out of his family for the crime of causing the death he'd just been trapped into causing. He walked out of that clan with nothing. No father, no mother, no name, no home. Just a sword spirit whispering in his ear, and a hatred for me so total it had become the only load-bearing thing left in him. Good, I thought. from a whole realm away, barely looking up. That's a hero properly made. They're always strongest when they've got nothing left to protect and nothing left to lose. I was building myself the perfect enemy, one atrocity at a time, and I knew it, and I kept sharpening him anyway, because a fish that fat is worth the wait. He came for me at a place called the Hidden Sword Villa, an ancient swordmaster's tomb, opening at last. Its treasures the exact fortune the universe had set aside to launch Zhou Lei back into the game. He and his knife spirit had a plan. Sneak in, seize the villa's control formation, and use 10,000 ancient flying swords to finally kill me. I showed up too, obviously, and the trip gave me one of my favorite people in this whole story, so let me introduce her before I get to the robbery. Her name was Du Wen, a goddess of one of the great immortal palaces, blessed with a heavenly flame immortal body, a physique even higher than the one I'd pulled out of Yang Wei, and a personality best described as a golden retriever that could level a city. She'd never lost a fight in her life. She was bored to tears by every genius who'd ever bowed to her, and she took one look at me, stepping off my boat, grabbed my hand before anyone could introduce us, and said, eyes shining, "You're Zhang Fei? I've heard so much about you. Come on, let's fight." Her poor brother nearly fainted. I've rarely been so charmed. So we fought, if you can call it that. She lit up like a sun, threw a fire lotus and a pack of flame dragons that could have cracked a mountain, and gripped my hand trying to burn the shock into my face. And I stood there in the middle of it feeling roughly like a man holding a warm cup of tea, told her sincerely that her physique was extraordinary, and then flicked her across the valley with one punch before she finished her second move. I healed her before she hit the ground because I liked her. And Du Wen, flat on her back, first defeat of her entire life, cheeks burning, looked up at me with the purest, most unhinged delight I have ever seen on a human face, and declared that once she got the divine sword from inside the villa, she'd beat me and then carry me back to her immortal palace and marry me whether I agreed or not. A hero's destined bride deciding to kidnap the villain into wedlock. I did not have that on my list. I've never enjoyed being on someone else's list more. Then I walked up to the villa's gate, a formation of 10,000 ancient swords that had been built to vaporize anything short of a true emperor, the exact defensive miracle meant to make Zhou Lei untouchable inside, and instead of dodging it or breaking it, I let it hit me, and I ate it. I stood in that storm of 10,000 blades and let my body drink every one of them, and when it cleared I hadn't got a scratch, I'd got a whole new sign in the heavens. 10,000 swords, returned to origin. The Dao Palace phenomenon the villa's dead master had chased his entire life and never achieved, the one meant to crown Zhou Lei as a sword god. I absorbed it off his front porch and wore it out like a new coat. Zhou Lei, hidden inside, felt his destined fortune get lifted clean out of his future, again, by the same man, again, and something in him that had been suspicious for a while started, quietly, to curdle. Why does my own sword spirit know so much about Zhang Fei? Why does everything I reach for end up in his hands before I touch it? He didn't have the answer yet, but he was starting to ask the right question. Which, for a son of destiny, is the most dangerous thing in the world, right up until the moment I decide it isn't. So that was the board, by the end. Heroes stacked to the ceiling, a pet one humiliating himself in a tower, a delusional one insulting me to my face, a crippled one curdling into my perfect enemy at the bottom of a sword tomb, a battle maniac goddess planning to marry me by force, a natural-born nemesis, and a whole Holy Land hatchery of future foes ripening on schedule. And me, at the top of all of it, holding every one of their books, so far ahead I'd stopped keeping score. Which is, of course, I keep telling you this, and I keep being right, exactly the moment the universe reached down and played the one card I couldn't read. It started with a knock on my father's door. An old friend of the family had come to visit, Su Guang, patriarch of the immortal ancient Qin family, my father's sworn brother, a man I'd called Uncle Qin my whole life. He is, incidentally, a full great emperor, 200,000 years old, one of a small handful of beings in creation who could give my own terrifying family a real fight. And he had come to the Gu family beaming to finalize the oldest, happiest arrangement of both our clans. He'd come to marry his daughter to me, Su Lingyu, my childhood sweetheart, the girl I'd held hands with under a sunset a month before this whole story started, who'd kissed my cheek and told me that the next time I came, she'd be my bride. Our families had been intertwined for 100 million years. It was the most natural marriage in the world, the one everyone had always assumed, the soft, happy ending nobody thought to question. Except Su Lingyu had, overnight, without explanation, refused it, and her furious, baffled father had come to my house to find out which of us had broken his daughter's heart. I walked into that hall expecting an awkward family lunch, and then the mirror flipped open a page, and I stopped breathing, because it read her, and it told me things no page had ever told me before. Su Lingyu, 20 years old, chaos body, the fourth-ranked constitution in all the heavens, one of the rarest and most powerful things a person can Be born as gold halo and a destiny value of 90,000. Let me put that number in scale for you. Yiming, whom I chased across a whole realm, had 1,200. Yang Wei had 2,000. Zhou Lei, the fattest fish I'd ever hooked, had 4,900. Su Lingyu had 90,000. She was worth 75 Tang Shans. She was, by an enormous margin, the single most significant person the universe had ever pointed my system at. And the title of her book, her destiny script, the novel of her life, was this. My heart was gouged out, and my bones were corrupted in my past life. Reborn, I go mad with slaughter. Related male lead, Zhang Fei. Me. She's a time traveler. Reborn. She has lived a future all the way to its end, died in it, and woken back up here, whole, years in the past, carrying every memory forward. And the future she lived through, the one that's coming for all of us if nobody changes it, is the one I've been dancing around this whole story, the one my own soul has started sketching in eerie signs at every breakthrough. In that future, I married her, and she loved me. God, she loved me since before either of us could cultivate all the way through the wedding, through the years after. She loved me so completely that when the other women came, she didn't weep or rage. She welcomed them, arranged them, managed my palace because a great prince should have a full court, and she wanted me to have everything. She turned the whole 3,000 realms upside down, helping my family perfect my body. She gave me her clan, her name, her fortune, her whole entire heart, and she never once doubted me, not even when she noticed the strange thing that I'd gathered a court full of women with rare and special constitutions and never touched a single one of them. She thought that was devotion, that I was keeping them pure, that I loved them too much to spoil them. It wasn't devotion, it was inventory management. Because a myriad transformations body, at its very highest breakthrough, the one that shatters the immortal lock and ascends, needs fuel, special fuel. Rare constitutions, gathered and kept and ripened, and then, at the end, taken, all at once. And when that day came, the man I become looked at the court of women who had given him their entire lives, and he saw exactly what he'd always seen under the tenderness and the sweet words and the peach blossom eyes. A pantry, ingredients he'd been keeping fresh. She was the last one. She felt the cold go in, and she looked up into the face she had loved her whole life, and in the final second, with everything already lost, the blade already found, her clan already fallen to make her helpless, she finally, completely understood. He had never loved a single one of them. Not her. Not once. The gentleness was seasoning. The devotion was fattening. The peach blossom eyes that had melted her since childhood were the exact eyes a butcher uses on livestock he's fond of. And then she woke up, here, now, years before the wedding, whole, her heart back in her chest, beating, and her hand pressed flat against it in the dark, checking. So when her father knocked on his daughter's door that morning, glowing, ready to make her oldest dream come true, she smiled at him with a face full of the love she used to feel, and said, "Father, I've changed my mind. Tell Uncle Zixuan I'm sorry. I need to cultivate." And that is the woman whose father was now sitting in my hall, demanding to know why she wouldn't marry me. They let me talk to her, in the end. Not in person, she wouldn't allow that. But through a communication stone, her cool, guarded face appearing in the air in front of me while our families gave us privacy. "Zhang Fei," she said, flat as a sealed door. "How have you been?" I looked at her. I gave her the eyes. The warm ones, the peach blossom ones, the ones that had never once failed me on any woman in any world. And I watched them land. Watched her breath catch, watched the old love flare up in her against her will, and watched, right behind it, the memory of what those exact eyes looked like from underneath a spear. The system went berserk. She hated me to the marrow. She loved me to the marrow. Both at maximum volume, both true, both feeding me villain points by the 1,000 chiu, because the cruelest negative emotion in all of creation, it turns out, is loving the person you know is going to murder you. "There's nothing to discuss, Zhang Fei," she said, her voice not quite steady. "I was young and foolish. I've grown up. Please forgive me and let it go. I could have pushed. I could have charmed, schemed, cornered her the way I've cornered everyone in this whole story. I didn't, because I finally understood what she was, and it stopped me cold. Every enemy I've ever beaten walked into my traps because they didn't know they were in a story. I had their books. I knew their futures. I stood on every opportunity before they arrived, smiling in the dark I'd prepared. That is the entire trick. That is the only trick. I win because I've read the ending and they haven't. Su Lingyu has read mine. She knows my opportunities. She lived through every one of them. She knows my schemes, my patterns, the exact shape of my charm, because she's already been fooled by all of it once, completely, fatally. She cannot be surprised because she's already lived the surprise. She cannot be seduced because she has felt, from the inside, precisely what the seduction is for. For the first time in my life, in either of my lives, There is someone out there hunting me who holds the one and only weapon I ever thought was mine alone. She's read my book, and she knows how it ends. And worse than that, worse than all of it, she knows how I end. She's seen the man I'm supposed to become, the one whose Tao Palace signs are already 10,000 demons devouring a heart, the one who harvests everyone who loves him. She looked at my warm eyes across that communication stone and she saw, behind them, the butcher who's coming, and she has decided, with 90,000 points of the purest destiny the universe has ever forged, to make absolutely certain that man never gets born. So I did the only thing I could do to a woman like that. I smiled gently and I let her win the round. If that's your choice, Schwanger, I said, soft as anything, then of course, I'll always respect your choice. And I closed the stone, hung up on her mid-glare, left her standing on the other side with all her armor up and no one to fight, every furious, grief-soaked, love-poisoned word she'd braced herself to say punching straight through empty air. I heard later, through the stone I'd left listening, what she did after. She screamed at the ceiling. She swore she'd intercept every opportunity I'd ever reach for, cripple me, catch me, and keep me at her side and make me suffer for the rest of a very long life. I won't let you die, she promised the empty room, shaking. Dying would be too easy for you. And underneath the fury, so quiet she'd never admit it, the oldest thing in her heart was still there, still beating, still hers, and it hated her for it. 3,000 more villain points landed in my account, the most any woman had ever given me, by far. I should have been thrilled. She's a bottomless well, she'll feed my system for a lifetime. Instead, I sat in that hall for a long time after the stone went dark, and I thought about a woman who loved me so much she planned to keep me alive just to punish me because she'd already watched me murder her once and couldn't quite bring herself to want me gone. And I thought about the eerie signs my own soul keeps drawing. And for the first time in this whole story, the whole story I've been telling you, grinning, from the top of a world I conquered, I wasn't sure I was the one telling it. So let me tell you where we are, you and I, at the end of tonight. The villain won. I want to be clear about that because it's true and I earned it. 2 heroes dead in the lower realm, a whole shelf of them broken in the upper one, a boy who lost his father and his name at the bottom of a sword tomb, a prince crippled in a valley, a servant humiliated at the top of a tower he built himself, a delusional dragon king insulting me from the dirt. A world folded into my chest, a family safe and loud and alive under the heavenly wheel, a court of brides, a demon emperor I gave to a good home, an empire that goes quiet when I walk past, and a battle maniac goddess who wants to marry me at sword point. Every stepping stone the universe laid out so lovingly for its precious heroes, I walked across and kicked into the sea, grinning the whole way. I opened this story flat on my back, 20 years old, calling out to a brand new system to save me from my own master, the most pathetic transmigrator ever to draw breath. I close it, a Tao Palace prince who outschemed the heaven of an entire world. And I have never been less sure of how my story ends. Because here's the thing the whole trip was built on, the trick under every trick. I win because I'm the reader. I hold everyone's book. I know every hero's future, stand on every prize before he arrives, smile in the dark I prepared. I was never a character in anyone's story. I was the one turning the pages, except now there's a woman out there who's read mine, who knows my every opportunity because she lived through them at my side, who can't be charmed because she's felt the charm from underneath a blade, who's watched, from the inside, the exact man I'm supposed to become, and who has decided, with the highest destiny the universe has ever forged, to hunt me down and make certain he never gets born. And the worst part, the part that's actually keeping me up, more than the reborn nemesis, more than Bai Dong finishing his ascent out in the Holy Land, more than Zhou Lei and Zhao Jian and Wei Yang and the whole endless tide of heroes rising across the realms with my family's name in their final chapters. The worst part is that when my power breaks the sky now, it draws a picture. 10,000 demons devouring a heart, a heavenly demon descending on a burning world. My own soul is starting to sketch the man she remembers. I've spent this whole story telling you I do it for my family, for my mother's hugs and my father's silences and my idiot uncle's wars, for a master who once ended a demon clan because they made me late for dinner. And that's true. Every framed boy, every drained clan, every drowned sea. I did it so that one warm, loud, impossible household would still be standing tomorrow. But she looked at me across a communication stone with a heart I once stopped with a spear, and she saw where that road ends, and I'm no longer certain she's wrong. Maybe that's the real gift the universe gave her, not the 90,000 points, not the second life. The mirror. She's the one person alive who can hold my own ending up in front of me while there's still time to write a different one. Or maybe she's just the last hero in the pile. The biggest fish, the final book on my shelf, and I'll read her the way I've read all the rest. I genuinely don't know yet. And after a lifetime of always knowing, that terrifies me more than anything a sword ever could. So that's the war, the reborn woman who knows my ending. The natural-born enemy waking in the Holy Land, the endless tide of heroes and the monster in my own reflection, and the single most important question I've ever faced, which is not whether I can win, I can always win, but whether winning is the thing that finally turns me into him. It's a lot. It's genuinely a lot. And you know what I'm actually going to go do about all of it tonight? I'm going to go home to my master because she told me to come back every week and bring her that library book, and there is not a force in this or any world, not the nemesis, not the tide, not the monster in my own soul, that is getting me out of that homework. The villain conquered the heavens. The villain reads everyone's book. But the villain still has to go home once a week and win a school tournament for the woman who raised him and grow old, if he's very lucky and very careful, surrounded by every single person he burned down the world to keep. That's the ending I'm going to try to write. The annoying one, the safe one. The one where everybody I love gets to grow old and irritating and alive, and I somehow don't become the thing in the mirror. Ask me if I think I'll manage it. I'll grin and tell you, of course, obviously, have you met me? And then, when you're not looking, I'll check one more time quietly that my own heart is still where I left it, just in case.